clerks, I'll just move right to roll call.
Mayor Stewart is in the chair. Councillor Carr.
Here.
Councillor De Genova. Councillor Fry.
Here.
Councillor Swanson.
Here.
Councillor Hardwick.
Present.
Councillor Wiebe.
Present.
Councillor Boyle.
Present.
Councillor Dominato.
Present.
Councillor Bly.
Present.
Councillor Kirby-Young. You have quorum, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to go through the plan for the day, but just to remind the public that it's worth following us on Twitter or on the city's website or YouTube link. And that's where all the proceedings are. And any comments can be sent to council using the web form, and that's also the address is also on Twitter. This evening we have the remaining agenda, the following remaining agenda items: 1 report, 2 referral reports, 23 bylaws, 1 administrative motion, 3 members' motions, notice of council members' motions, new business inquiries, and other matters. So we do have just 4 hours this evening to try to get through these, and then perhaps the clerk, if we don't get through, we can look for another day. But I imagine it is probably the next council day. But I'll get back to you with a date if we don't get through. We'll now consider reports remaining from yesterday. We have report 3 that has speakers, so we will hear that. And referral reports 6 and 7 were held by Councillor Hardwick. So we'll move to number 3, which is 7520 Balaclava Street. It's a proposed agricultural land reserve subdivision. And I just want to inform council, we'll hear this a bit from staff, but I did want to inform you that this is a new process for council, a provincial change that's required by the Agricultural Land Commission Act. So it's an applicant process. So the applicant is entitled to speak to the application and is here, or was on the list, maybe here this evening. The Agricultural Land Commission cannot proceed with the proposed subdivision if council does not support and forward the application. So what used to be a 1-step process where a proponent would just go to the Agricultural Land Commission now is a 2-step process where it has to go through the local government and the Agricultural Land Commission. So we have Nick Danford, the rezoning planner, here to provide a short presentation for report 3, which we'll see since this is a new process, and we have a speaker on the list to speak. So perhaps we can go to Nick Danford.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. I'm just confirming you can see my presentation and hear me.
I can hear you. If you could maybe move the microphone slightly closer to yourself, that would be good.
Sure. Is that better?
A little bit better.
Okay.
And we do see your presentation on the public screen.
Okay, great. I'll project a bit more. So
okay.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. As mentioned, my name is Nick Danford, and I'm one of the planners here at the city. So the file in front of council today is for a proposed subdivision in the city's agricultural land reserve down in Southlands. Since this is something new, as Mayor Stewart had mentioned, we at the city don't really deal with this all that often, and so I'm hoping council will bear with me while I go through the proposal itself, as well as the regulatory process involved with reviewing such an application. I also just wanted to note that yesterday we did receive a few questions from council, and I will respond to those at the end of my presentation. So this past fall, city staff received notification from the ALC, or the Agricultural Land Commission, that an application for an 18-lot subdivision had been filed at 7520 Balaclava Street in the city's ALR. The ALR consists of land throughout the province designated by the Agricultural Land Commission to be retained as viable agricultural land. The ALC regulates and is the approving authority for any subdivision taking place within these lands. So just quickly, in this instance for the proposal, a subdivision is when a piece of property is divided into smaller parcels. So that's what you'll see in front of you today. So now, once an application for subdivision is received through the ALC's portal, the application is forwarded to the local government for consideration and input. So by resolution of council, the city has the discretion to either forward or not forward the application for subdivision to the ALC as per the ALC Act. So if council exercises its authority to not forward the application, it will proceed no further. If the city does forward the application, whether in support or not, the ALC will make a decision on the subdivision taking into account local government comments. So the proposal for subdivision that was received by staff is to create 18 detached residential lots ranging from 720 to 992 square meters in size. The proposal also includes a land dedication of approximately 1 hectare. Included in the 1 hectare is a 4-meter wide river walk along the Fraser River frontage of the property, a new public green space at the end of Balaclava Street that is directly adjacent an historic shipyard workshop, which is included in the dedication. A new public road would split through the subdivision, connecting Blenheim to Balaclava Street, as well as there's environmentally sensitive lands to the west of the property that would also be dedicated. So, Council, I'm sure that you have an idea of approximately where we're talking about. The 8-acre former industrial shipyard is located in the far south end of Balaclava Street along the Fraser River in the city's Southlands neighborhood. The neighborhood is a unique and semi-rural area of town with larger residential and agricultural properties, some housing equestrian farms as well as stables. So given the semi-rural nature of the neighborhood, RA1 or limited agricultural use zoning is really dominant in the area. The regulations in the RA1 zone allow for lots to be a minimum size of 9,100 square meters. Oh, sorry about that. So directly north of the site are city-owned lots on Celtic Avenue that contain a slough-type waterway, and because of this are generally not developable. To the west of the site is Deering Island development, which consists of 37 single detached residential homes subdivided in the early 90s. To the east are 12 single detached residential homes that were rezoned in 2005 in order to facilitate this development. And of course, to the south is Fraser River. So the site currently houses an eclectic mix of uses and structures. There are some unused horse yards, a marina, shipyard buildings that house local artists, as well as a warehouse containing a local business. Interestingly enough, the site has been identified as potentially containing archaeological significant resources, and it has been identified as historically relevant lands for the Musqueam First Nations, as well as an early settlement site for Japanese Canadians. So now I'd just like to get into a bit of the city's policy currently in place that regulates this piece of property. In addition to the ALR regulations, this property is designated agricultural in the city's Regional Context Statement Official Development Plan. So the ODP is a zoning tool that links municipal policies and plans to Metro Vancouver's regional growth strategy. The RGS sets an urban containment boundary and reinforces protection of agricultural, conservation, and rural lands. The proposal in front of you does not conform to the goals of the Regional Context Statement. The property outlined here in yellow also fits within the Southlands Plan that was approved in 1988 and sets a series of policies reinforcing the semi-rural nature of the area. So in the plan, this property itself is identified as Celtic Island area. And in 1986, Council adopted the objective to create significant public waterfront access through the island or through the site. Protect the equestrian character of the area, and exploit opportunities to secure a unique park environment and preserve fish and wildlife habitat. Now, while the proposal does present many opportunities, there are a number of policy challenges and further considerations that require discussion and investigation with a variety of stakeholders before the subdivision can be considered. The largest of the proposed subdivided lots is 992 square meters. This is significantly less than the minimum lot size of 9,100 square meters required in the RA1 district schedule. And so because of this, in order to facilitate the proposed subdivision, a rezoning application would need to be approved by council. So in this case, there is no rezoning policy that would support considering this application. And at this time, there's no future policy initiatives for this area other than the citywide Vancouver plan. So in addition to these policy challenges, there's heritage, archaeological, environmental, and parkland considerations that require further conversation with key stakeholders as well as the city in advance of considering a rezoning application here. So, Council, for these reasons, today staff are recommending that Council not forward the application to the ALC, thereby not advancing the application any further. And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, Council did send through a few questions in advance of the meeting. And before I hand it back over to Mayor Stewart, I'd like to take the opportunity to just respond to those few questions. So the first one that we received was what, if any, consultation has taken place within the neighborhood with the Musqueam Nation, with the Japanese Canadian community about the site and subdivision proposal. So a synopsis for communication with these stakeholders to date was not submitted with the subdivision application, but I believe Michael Mortensen, who is representing the developer, is on the speakers list, and so he'd be best suited to speak and address that question. The second question is what archaeological investigations have taken place to date regarding possible middens and other cultural or historical significance. And so the same answer here, we do not, this information was not submitted with the subdivision application, and so I'm hoping that Michael Mortensen might be able to respond to that question as well. The third question is what direction to staff is necessary to have the shipyard workshop building added to the Heritage Registry? So adding this building to the registry would only recognize its heritage value, but would not offer any protection to the site. Additions to the register are usually done with approval and cooperation with the owner, and adding to the register would not create any commitment of further development of lands, but may create expectation on the applicant's behalf that the city is willing to accommodate future redevelopment and possible compensation for this retention. And the final question is, does the city have any title to the site in question? And the answer is no to that. And so with that, Mayor Stewart, I'll hand it back over to you. Thank you. And we're here to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And as this procedure is fairly new, I'm going to ask clerks: do we go to the speaker now, or do we have a round of questions by council to staff, like in a public hearing?
It would be similar to the public hearing process. So you would get we answer questions of council can ask questions of staff before we hear from the speakers.
And in this case, I believe the speaker is the proponent. Would we ask if the proponent wants to present first before, or so it in that way it would vary from a public hearing?
So it would be treated similar to any council agenda items, so not fall into the public hearing process.
Great. Okay, thanks so much. So at this point, council, then I'm going to turn to you. I do have a number of folks with questions.
I have a parliamentary procedure. Sorry, Mayor. It's Councilor.
Go ahead.
Just in that vein, as I seem to recall, the city manager had circulated an actual process, like a sort of order of how this was to proceed. So are we following that? That was circulated.
Well, that's why I'm checking with the clerk, just to make sure that we're doing this right. Right. So that was circulated, and we are following it, but it's similar to a public hearing, but it is more like a regular council. It proceeds more like a regular council report or motion. So we'll go to Councillor Carr for 5 minutes. Questions to staff.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. My first question is, have staff contacted the Musqueam Nation? And if so, what is their opinion of this project or proposal?
Great, thanks for the question, Councillor Carr. No, we haven't been in touch with the Musqueam First Nations. We are looking for the applicant to start those conversations.
Okay. Second question. What would be the process with Metro Vancouver and the regional contracts statement should council decide that we do want to forward this application and or support this application, and is there any requirement for us to actually check first with Metro Vancouver, which actually has to approve of any withdrawals of land from the Agricultural Land Commission that is designated within the regional context statement.
Sorry, Councillor Carr. Yeah, so any changes to the regional growth strategy would need to be approved by Metro Vancouver.
Right. So can we make a decision without going through Metro Vancouver?
I believe we would need to consult them and engage them in the process. We wouldn't be able to hand over to just single-handedly change the designation.
Yeah, that's my understanding too. So this could not be forwarded with saying that there's our support. I mean, well, anyway, I'm just saying that if we don't get the support of Metro Vancouver, how could we possibly say that we support it? So isn't there a step there that we have to go through before we would indicate support?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. There are a lot of moving parts to it, and so we would want to engage with Metro Vancouver before moving forward with any changes to the designation.
Right.
Can I just stop your timer there, Councillor Carr? I think this is a really important point. So if staff could just, there are a whole bunch of steps that this would take for a plan, but this first step that we're going through today is only to allow permission for this to go to the ALR, the Agricultural Land Commission, and if they reject it, then it's dead. If we reject it, it's dead. If it goes to the LR and they reject it, it's dead. If it goes to Metro, it's dead. If we don't rezone it, it's dead. There's so many, but I think there's sequential steps, if that helps. So this is the very first step that has to happen.
May I just interject there, Councillor Carr? We're trying to find a bit more specifics for you on this question.
Great. Okay, I appreciate that. If we could hear that before we come to a decision-making point, that would be great.
Sure.
My third question is surrounding a report that I received on the previous council that I was on, or we received, and that was regarding the most vulnerable areas to climate change, specifically rising sea levels. This area was one of the ones identified as one of the most vulnerable to sea level rise. And my memory of that staff report was amongst the different options staff wanted council to be starting to consider and think about is in fact abandonment or retreat, recognizing that it would be impossible to build a dike long enough along the lower Fraser to be able to protect this area. I wonder if you could provide council with some verification of that, some extra information around that. Why are we even considering development in a place that staff have identified as having potential to have abandonment or retreat?
Great, thanks, Councillor Carr. So yeah, this site is located in the Fraser River floodplain, and it's the largest and most at-risk floodplain in the city of Vancouver. So this creates the environmental complexities around it. So there are some minimum flood protection levels that would need to be met, as well as setbacks from the waterway.
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bly, up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor. I will just jump in right there where Councillor Carr left off. I'm curious if the proposed plan allows for the setbacks you mentioned regarding the floodplain, and that there would be required setbacks. Does the plan allow for setbacks that would be adequate?
We don't have. Thank you for the question, Councillor Bly. We don't have that information right now. We would be expecting that any application would meet those requirements and go higher. And so, but we don't have that information at this time with the application that was put forward.
Okay, and follow up to that in terms of process, that this report moving ahead in council would allow the ALC to come back and be able to provide more detail around some of the concerns that staff have raised. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the ALC would be able to, the ALC is the approving body of the subdivision, and so they can approve the subdivision on conditions, and so the condition of going through a rezoning process and exploring these would likely be their condition if providing council and local government comments on that.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the comment that, and by the map, it looks like this is the absolute last portion of ag land in Vancouver. And the comment made was that we have a responsibility to protect viable land, agricultural land. Is this land actually viable? Meaning, can it be used as agricultural land?
Thanks for the question. My understanding is that the lands are being used more as have a more industrial nature. So actually, some contamination exploration would need to be done in advance of that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I note that in the plan there is a mention of the shipyard building, but there are existing buildings in and around that shipyard building. Is it the assumption that those buildings would come down and don't hold any heritage value?
So further investigation would need to take place. So far, the shipyard building has been identified as a historic building, a significantly historic building. However, staff would be wanting further information on the other buildings before proceeding.
Okay. You make a comment around the RA1 zone, the 9,100 square meters is the average lot size, and I'm just wondering, how does the proposed lot size in the plan compare to an average residential single-family lot size in any other RM zone?
These ones would be a bit larger than the standard residential lot.
Okay.
Significantly larger.
Okay, so the ones proposed in the plan are significantly larger than what we may see elsewhere. In fact, but maybe a follow-up question to that, it's been compared to the development on Deering Island, and that sort of development, I've heard people say, I wasn't around at the time, of course, that it took some innovative planning direction to enable or to sort of realize Deering Island as a development in terms of it being subdivided. How do the lot sizes compare to Deering Island?
They're comparable.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the plan, the Southlands ODP established, I think, in 1988 or maybe 86. I can't remember what you said there. Is staff, I mean, that's a long time, but I understand that residents in Southlands are quite happy with that plan and are really in a position or hold a position that they want to protect that plan. Does staff concur that that plan ought to be protected as much as possible?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so staff recognize that it is an old plan and it does need some updating. However, like I had mentioned in the presentation, there's no immediate policy initiative other than the citywide Vancouver plan.
Okay. As for the plan that's come forward, does staff feel that there would be required investments that the city would be responsible for to realize the sort of final product of the park that would be gifted to the city of Vancouver and or the shipyard's historic building, or is this sort of being proposed as a sort of turnkey gift if the development was to be realized?
Yeah, thanks for the question. That would have to be explored through the process. We would have to have a better understanding of what is being provided and look at a negotiation and a pro forma with that.
Okay, I'd like to move for a second round of questions, if I may, Mayor.
Indeed. So we have a seconder for second round of questions.
Councilor Dominato.
Thanks. And we'll do yays and nays. All in favor, yay.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, Council, thanks. We'll go to Councillor Kirby-Young. Next, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. One is, I've read the report in great detail, and I'm pretty clear on the process. And there's a lot of stakeholders listed, the significance to the muskrat, the Japanese fishery, obviously the area residents and others. But I note there wasn't any specific reference to the other buildings that currently house working artists, and in some cases, I think the artists are both working as well as living there. And I'm just wondering if there's been any discussion on that between the proponent and city staff, and why they're not referenced in the report as one key stakeholder that would be impacted by this proposal.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Kirby-Young. This is a very early stages application, and so we would expect that those conversations would be forthcoming if this would proceed any further.
Okay, but our staff are aware that this is housing working artists currently that are on site?
Yes, yes, staff is aware that there's artist studios there.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear on that. The other question that I have is that it seems that the applicant has chosen to bring this forward looking, my take on it is to sort of get some certainty as to whether there's a possibility of moving forward. And staff references in the report that there isn't a governing policy to consider this under. I'm wondering if the applicant had sort of done further due diligence around potentially really looking at what was involved in the cost to retain the ship facility, which would potentially need a lot of work to maintain it, had done some outreach with the Musqueam First Nation or conversations with some of the Japanese history neighbors and had advanced and got more of a sense of how those stakeholders felt if staff would view this application any differently than the recommendation we have before us.
That's a great, the question about that consultation is a great question for Mr. Mortensen, for the applicant.
Well, my question was specifically a staff because from what I understand, they haven't engaged. My question is specifically what staff perspective, in the sense that the applicant, to my knowledge, hasn't chosen to engage yet, and that would be looking to do that after. They're trying to get some of the regulatory hurdles out of the way first. Would you view the application any differently? It's my question to staff.
Thank you, Councillor. This is Teresa O'Donnell. Yes, we absolutely think those consultations are very important. As Nick said, this is a very premature application. He went through a number of studies and consultations that we would normally see in something like this, not only the consultations with First Nations and other groups, but also an exploration of the archaeological resources, the historic resources, the floodplain and flood-prone areas are a large concern. Consultation with the park board about open space and what improvements might be necessary along that riverwalk. Those are all very important discussions and studies, and that we would need to see prior to advancing this in any term, if it were to come back for some kind of a zoning. But the first step is, of course, whether or not the council has an appetite to remove this from the agricultural land. So that's why we're here, and we don't have a lot of detail at this point.
Okay, that's helpful. I'm going to leave it there for now.
Thank you. Councillor Fry, up to 5.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate Ms. O'Donnell's context there, and especially reflecting sort of some of the larger planning that needs to go on in that area. And I would add, based on a video that was shared with us from one resident, that some further planning into the road network and shared access with horses and cars is probably something that also needs further exploration in a master planning sense. I'm curious about the context of the regional context statement, and if staff are concerned that this might be precedent setting. As I look at some of the other properties within the ALR and some of the subdivisions here in Vancouver, is there a concern that this would be a precedent setting consideration should council approve this request to go to the ALC?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Fry. I'm going to hand that over to Susan Haid to respond.
Oh, hi, this is Susan Haid, Deputy Director, Long Range Strategic Planning. Certainly, at any time that there is an exclusion to the ALR and an amendment to the regional growth strategy, there is the potential of it being precedent setting to other member municipalities. So yes, that risk is there. Vancouver is an anomaly in that we have a small ALR area in a very urbanized municipality. And it typically is, the agricultural uses are for large estate, more horse lands than productive agriculture. But yes, that amendment could be precedent setting, and certainly at the regional board, something that would raise a number of questions from other member municipalities.
I appreciate that nuanced response. On the further subject of long range and strategic planning, Councillor Carr earlier mentioned the sea level rise reports that talked about managed retreat of Southlands. In the event that we were for parts of Southlands, in the event of sea level rise and flooding and glacial melt that raised the Fraser and all those kind of components that we of course are dealing with climate change. Is there any, should this be approved to go forward to the ALC and then approved in zoning and actualized, is there a risk to the city for liability for future flooding should we approve development on what we know is already kind of a floodplain and a high risk area? Speaking legal liability risk.
That would be a question for law, but
I'm here. I could answer the question. It's Grant Murray.
Oh, great. Yeah, thank you, Grant.
If we followed our ordinary procedure, which is that somebody would be given notice of any construction in accordance with the floodplain regulations, then they would be adopting their own, they would be obligated to discharge any risks to themselves. We wouldn't have any liability because they would have been specifically warned that there's a problem. That may not be something you're comfortable with, but that certainly would be the law. They construct, it's their problem, not our problem. If I could just weigh in on a couple of things that I've heard so far that have concerned me a little bit. This is not an exclusion application. They have not applied to exclude this from the ALR. This will remain in the ALR after any decision is made today. This is also not a rezoning application. They have not sought any rezoning in any manner whatsoever. The reason that this is before council is that we're obligated to bring it to council. We have no choice but to bring it to council. It was an application brought to the ALC. We have to dispose of it. In fact, our obligation was to dispose of it within 60 days of it being done, and we didn't meet that time, but this is the earliest that we could possibly do it. I think those are all important considerations for this. It's not to exclude it. It's not to rezone it. We have to do it. If this had been done prior to the general order being lifted, which is one of the reasons that we're now facing this, this would have just been simply dismissed by the the approving officer saying this doesn't meet the zoning, you cannot subdivide this. And it would have been as simple as that. Now it requires council to weigh in on it if it's going to be sent to the ALC. Our recommendation is not to send it to the ALC, in large part because it doesn't meet our zoning.
Well, thanks, Mr. Murray. I appreciate you providing that input. I'm glad you're here to do so. Thank you. I'm out of time.
Councillor Dominato, up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor. Sorry. Just a couple of follow-up questions. At the beginning of the presentation, staff referenced that if this were to go to the ALC, that the ALC would take into consideration local government comments. How would those be received? What would that look like? Is that through deliberations here, they're minuted, or is it something formally submitted by council?
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. Nick Danford here. We would forward the meeting minutes of the council meeting today.
Okay, that's all the ALC would receive?
With the report.
Okay. And you talked to, and thank you for addressing my questions at the outset of the presentation, but how would we go about protecting the shipyard building, the workshop building? Obviously you mentioned putting it on the registry doesn't give it any protection, so is there any ability for the city to protect it?
Hi, Councillor Jason Olnick at Development Planning. Yeah, we would work with an applicant in normal circumstances, normal applications. Through that, we would seek to put it on the register and get it designated. That designation is what would protect it. Right now, it has neither of those. So through the zoning process, with the rezoning process, we would be able to work with them to secure that.
Okay, but in the instance, so because it's been clarified what we're dealing with today is the subdivision request is that if this doesn't go forward, what happens? Do we still have the opportunity to work with the owner to?
Yes, we will continue to do that. Yes.
Okay, and what about in terms of the proposal itself, in terms of there's a proposal around 50% dedication to the city, and part of the I think from the Southlands plan there was a priority to restoration of waterfront and green space. Would that opportunity go away as well if we support staff recommendation tonight? It stays in private hands and we have no access to do any kind of restoration.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dominato. I mean, the opportunity would not go away in terms of there would still be opportunity if another proponent would come forward with this piece of land at a later date.
Okay. Okay. I think I'm going to pause there. I have a few more questions, but I'll wait till the second round. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Boyle. Up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, and most of my questions were asked. I also was quite interested in hearing what engagement had or hadn't happened with the Musqueam Nation, and so appreciate that information. The question I have for staff, forgive me, I don't have my Housing Vancouver book or data in front of me. I'm curious if staff can speak to if this is a type of housing that our Housing Vancouver plan has identified as a need in the city.
Thanks, Councillor Boyle. I'll pass that one over to Susan Haid.
Sorry, I was just on mute. In terms of this being, essentially smaller lot than existing Southlands lots, but a subdivision of detached housing, this is not identified as a current need in Housing Vancouver strategy.
Okay, and related to that, I guess, do we have a sense of the kind of a ballpark cost of what this type of housing would go for, and who in Vancouver, who would live there, who could afford it?
Yeah, certainly this, I don't have a ballpark cost, but we can certainly assume in terms of detached housing that it would be much significantly higher than the target income of our 30 to 80 moderate income, or 50 to 80 moderate income. It would exceed that substantially. As well, in Housing Vancouver, we have been advancing significantly on townhousing targets, and Vancouver has not seen townhouses for decades, and this is not that, and would be anticipated to be again a higher income bracket than ground-oriented townhousing.
Is there a possibility if this if council supports staff recommendations and it sort of goes back to the drawing board, so to speak, that with quite a bit of work down the road, something like townhomes or more affordable housing could be an option in this type of location? Or is that, I don't mean to put you in an awkward position. I know there's lots of layers of how.
Sure, I think ideally, I mean, we recognize that the Southlands plan is significantly dated. It's from the 1980s, and this is the only piece of agricultural land reserve in the city of Vancouver. We do see an opportunity in the Vancouver plan to look at this area broadly in the current context, and to really think about the multiple objectives that Ms. O'Donnell highlighted around resiliency, around food production, and really in terms of some of the long-term benefits, and looking at opportunities for heritage, for arts, but also for potential housing, but that is very compatible with the land in this area. I think further, and it really was highlighted in staff's presentation, collaboration with the Musqueam and really greater direction in terms of long-range vision for the area is something that we would want to see at least at a framework level in the Vancouver plan to then inform more detailed area planning to achieve all those objectives in a current context.
Okay, great. I really appreciate all of those answers, all of that information. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you very much. I was just having a look at homes costs in Celtic Shores, which are around $8 to $9 million each, to the earlier question. I'm interested in what the property is being used for at the moment. I can tell you, having worked in the film industry for 25 years, it's a popular filming location, or it has been historically. Do we know how the owner is using the land at this time?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Hardwick. It's staff's understanding that there are some artist studios down there. There's a local business that exists within a warehouse, and yes, indeed, when I went down to the site, I saw some tents and whatnot for filming.
Is there a trucking company running trucks through the Southlands in RA1 zoning at this time?
I am unaware. That's a good question for Mr. Mortensen.
Okay. Yeah, and again, I just confirming again that this is a very unique piece of property, the last in the agricultural use in the city of Vancouver, and it's RA1, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so that contemplates stables, which is still an agricultural use. Would it also anticipate any other kind of animal husbandry, or again, talking about resilience and capitalizing on limited agricultural land?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Hardwick. Yeah, yes, the RA1 zone does contemplate, smaller scale, limited use agricultural uses.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato, I've got you back on for 2.5 minutes, 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor DiGenova, I'm trying to get onto my VPN here. Could you please add me to the list for questions?
Sure. Okay, you're on there. Okay,
Mayor,
sure. Go.
I'll let Councillor DiGenova go first because she hasn't been part of the first round of questions. So.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Well, it's only Councillor DeGenova on the list, so. Okay, Councillor DeGenova, go ahead. Councillor DeGenova. Councillor DeGenova. Councillor DeGenova, are you there? Clerks, I don't see her on the screen or in the call-in. Okay, Councillor Dominato, we'll move to you, and if Councillor DeGenova comes back, we'll allow her questions. So you have just about 2 minutes, just over 2 minutes.
Okay, just a quick point of parliamentary procedure. Will we be able to ask staff questions after we hear from the applicant?
You can do it through points of information during debate and decision.
Okay, thank you. To staff, a question for you. Obviously, the recommendation is to not support this proposal this time because we don't have a policy framework that supports it, and misalignment with existing planning. I'm just curious, is there an opportunity to give direction around having the applicant engage in some public consultation? Because when I sent the questions via email the other day, it was around the considerations around the Musqueam Nation, the Japanese Canadian community, the ratepayers association, and others? And is it possible to have that sort of engagement and then have it come to council because I feel like we're missing a lot of information.
Councillor Donato, thank you. This is Teresa O'Donnell, and I'm going to ask Grant to help me with this. I do believe it's important for the council to act on this application quickly. However, that would not preclude us from going back and talking with Mr. Mortensen or other representatives about the future development of this property and asking them to engage in some of these additional studies so that we could have the kind of necessary foundational work we need to be able to assess an application and then bring it back to council at a future date.
Okay. Thank you. And I want to follow up on the question that Councillor Carr raised about the rising sea level. And I don't have the map in front of me, but in the presentation, there was reference to the subdivision of Deering Island and then the other adjacent properties. Are they set back? Were those considerations taken into account? I think it was the Celtic Shores that was referenced, just east of the property.
Yes, ma'am. Those were, and typically what we do, the way these properties are handled when they're in the floodplain is there would be a floodplain study that would be undertaken. We would establish a safe finished floor elevation for any future structures, homes, barns, and the property would have to be filled or those structures somehow elevated above those critical floodplain levels to be safe.
Thanks. That's over 5, so we're over to Councillor DeGenova.
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
I can.
My computer just restarted, but I will ask my questions here if that's all right.
Sure.
If you can hear me loud and clear.
I
Thanks
can.
so much. My questions for staff are, and here, trying not to duplicate some of the questions, but how many artists are on site, and are those artists in live work situations, and how long have they lived on the site?
Thanks for the question, Councillor DeGenova. Again, that's a good question for Mr. Mortensen to provide greater detail on the artists on the property.
Yes, we don't currently have that information, so we would ask the applicant to provide that to the council.
Okay, thanks very much. And just in having the opportunity to walk down in that area and sort of see the beautiful waterfront, I'm just wondering. I mean, there's a few docks that are in disarray and really, quite. I don't want to say bad repair, but I think that they could actually be hazardous. I mean, is this one of the things that kind of is being proposed as a first step to kind of get to another process? I'm trying to. I know this is a bit of a unique process that we're going through, as had been mentioned, that there was actually 6 days. So I'm just wondering, I mean, whose duty is it to kind of like make sure that moves forward, especially if there's different ownership, like ownership across other levels of government, and making sure that they're safe structures?
Thanks for the question, Councillor DeGenova. Yeah, I mean, those are all really important points, and that they would be the responsibility of the applicant to work through all of those considerations.
Okay, so this leads me to my last question before we will have a chance to, I believe, is the applicant able to speak to us here at council? That's my understanding.
The applicant will be, there will be one speaker who owns the property and is involved in the application who will present, and then we can ask questions.
So my last question is this a part of process? Is this more of a procedural step? Because the consultation that I think we're all wondering about with the Musqueam Nation, the Japanese Canadian community, the Southlands Riding Club, the neighborhoods, that couldn't commence unless this were to come to council. It's a little bit like a chicken and egg situation. Is that the case here? I'd really like to understand from staff if that's kind of what their take on this.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor Digenova. It's a good one. It is a bit of a chicken and the egg situation. In order to do a subdivision in the ALR, the applicant has to apply to the ALC because they are ultimately the approving subdivision body for any lands there. And so this is the first step in that process, is to come to the local government for consideration and input. And so that's where they're at. There hasn't been a great deal of discussion. This application was presented to us, and we had the 60 days to respond, as Mr. Murray had mentioned. And so this is the first bit of the process.
Okay, and Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I can't see my timer right now, but I understand there's 2 rounds of questions. These questions are quite important. I just was wondering if the applicant, I suppose there's no real application right now, specifically before us that we're looking at, but considering the owner of the lands, we're not sure if they've done this consultation, just as I'd mentioned, and thanks for answering my question. Would staff possibly have considered this differently if that was done ahead of time with those stakeholder groups?
Thank you, Councillor.
Or is it strictly considered under the zoning? Thanks.
Right. Thank you so much. We evaluated the proposal that was submitted to us under the regional context statement, the Southlands policy, and the current zoning. I'm sure I don't want to speak for the applicant, but all these other studies, there's a number of studies that would need to be required, and I'm sure they may have been hesitant to absorb that expense without an early indication from the council whether or not the council was interested in releasing this land. So, and you're right, Councillor, I do believe it's a bit of a chicken and egg, but we certainly don't have the type of information or the level of detail that we would normally like to see when we evaluate a case like this.
Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's 5 minutes.
That's all my questions.
Thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young. Up to 5 o'clock?
I think we're
Sorry,
past
5 o'clock. Yeah.
I'll take
I
5
don't
minutes.
know. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I don't know. How does that work?
No problem. I have a follow-up question as it relates to agricultural use. And so the question was asked because I know it's an anomaly, and but sort of the legacy and sort of the nature of the Southlands area is equestrian. So I just wanted to clarify through staff that horses or horse stables qualify as an agricultural use. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Okay, and I know that part of the sort of when you read through the Southland guidelines, the 88 plan and the 2 different sort of guideline documents, there's sort of a clear focus, I believe, on the retention of sort of the equestrian history. There's, in terms of the number of buildings, preservation of size of lots, preservation of barns, that kind of thing. There are unused horse barns or not working horse barns on the property at this point. Am I correct in that?
Yes, Councillor Kirby-Young, you're correct.
Okay, so conceivably, if it did not receive subdivision but remains in the ALR, that is another potential utilization for the property within the existing classification and ODP in the area. Is that am I stating that correctly?
Yep, correct, Councillor Kirby-Young.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thanks. That's it on the question queue for staff. I think I've got that right. And now we're going to move to hear from Mr. Mortensen.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead whenever
Excellent.
you're ready.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the questions you have, the number of questions you have, and I think you're getting a sense of the complexity of the question of the future of this site, given the multiple layers of jurisdiction that are applicable. I want you to know that my client, Celtic, who owns the property, is in no way trying to rush the process. They really want to move forward with a fulsome rezoning application that has intense public involvement with the Musqueam, with the Southlands equestrian community, the Japanese Canadian Society, anyone who has an interest in this land. The problem that Celtic faces is that they have this kind of double, or maybe even triple if you include Metro, triple layer cake of jurisdictions. And it's a question of what goes first, what moves first. And the city planning department, in its July 2020 letter, gave Celtic a pretty negative signal that there is no policy to support the smaller lots within the RA zone, and that it would require the ALC approval to change it. And despite the fact that when you look at what's proposed, it is highly consistent with the 1988 Southlands Community Plan. It talks about reconnecting the waterfront, talks about adding park and amenity. So what Celtic is really looking for is just an opportunity to begin the consultation with everybody. And I tell you, Mr. Janan, who's the VP of Celtic, he's met with a Musqueam councillor and is planning to discuss this proposal in really full detail with the Musqueam board. And Celtic has undertaken phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments by PGL environmental consultants. There was an archaeology study by PGL consultants in 2017, and also a further archaeological study in 1985 that says there's there's a little part of the site on the north side that needs maybe some further study, but generally no archaeological evidence was found over most of the site. So they're prepared to do that. They're prepared to undertake all of these technical studies. They've done a geotech study by Geopacific of soil and groundwater conditions, and Geopacific's concluded the proposed development is viable. They've got servicing off-site and on-site plans by Apple and Martin, and they've got preliminary shoreline design, site grading, flood control by Apple and Martin as well. But I think Teresa O'Donnell, hit the nail on the head. Is that in order to move forward with any kind of public involvement, there has to be a window of opportunity to consider changing or amending or creating some sort of new RA zone for this site that keeps the land in the ALR. I think council needs to understand that this isn't a withdrawal of land from the ALR. It's actually changing the minimum lot size within the RA zone. And I can tell you that it's completely possible to add homes either at the scale of Deering Island to the west or the Musqueam subdivision to the east. That would be, if you followed the pattern of the Musqueam subdivision to the east, that would be 10 lots. And the Deering Island gives you the 18 lots that Celtic is looking for. But they need an opening. So it's, in terms of equestrian interests, for example, it's completely possible to create a common stable that members of the public could use, that the homeowners who move in could use. We can through a CAC negotiation dedicate, upgrade, retain the historic shipyard building. There are a couple of other really interesting buildings on the site with beautiful wood trusses that are actually in really good shape. Those could become, for example, a common stable. So we can accommodate plural interests on this site, dedicate 51% of this site to the city of Vancouver, to the residents of the entire city for their enjoyment and amenity. Completing that waterfront trail also achieves a metro strategy for linking up the Fraser. So, it's a bit of a chicken and egg. They filed this application because, in fact, in the first paragraph of the city letter to them, you need to change the ALC designation of this, or the rules on the subdivision for the agricultural land. So they did that. It's a $300 application, and as you can see, it compels council to look at it within 60 days. So what really they want is a window of opportunity to go ahead and do the full public involvement. They're in no way trying to rush the process or bypass consultation. What they need before they make this investment is some direction from council that says, hey, this is an interesting proposal. Let's consider it and let's address all the technical issues and run a public process. But they really need that signal that there's something there. If council doesn't open a window to change, then basically this site could be carved into 3 lots that remain in private ownership with no public access to the Fraser, with no park space, with no retention of the heritage building, the last shipyard building of its kind in the region. You know, I think there's a lot on offer that would be really compelling to many groups. And so what we're looking for is for council to give Celtic a window of opportunity to consult with people, to look at options for maybe changing the lot sizes, retain the RA designation, but maybe RA1A, but let's be creative, because I think there's a lot here that would be a great benefit for the city. They can address the flood control level. They can eager to consult with the Musqueam, eager to consult more with the Japanese Canadian community, eager to consult with neighbors. Right? So I think that's my message to council, and my request is let's talk about this. And if we want, we can withdraw the application and the ALC application and start with the technical studies, but really they need a bit of a green light that, you know what, most of what's proposed, other than the lot sizes, is highly consistent with the 1988 Southlands Plan. So I think that addresses a lot of the questions. Artists on site. So, in terms of affordable housing, these lots at this size with homes of those sizes are not going to be Vancouver's supply of affordable housing. I think council is doing a good job trying to address that with rental in the rest of the city. But what we can do, and what Celtic is committed to do, they have artisans on site. They've got a metal worker, we had a painter, we had a studio on site. And Celtic is quite prepared to do some artist live work studios as part of a bigger plan. It's a great idea because it puts people on that property 24/7. It's not just empty space. It has that sort of passive surveillance security of people living there. So we can do some affordable housing. Artists love that space, and in fact, some of the artists that live there would love to live there. So they're quite happy to do that. So there's a lot we can do. We can elevate the site. They have civil engineering advice that they can elevate the site so that it hits the flood control level that the city desires. We need to do some building conditions surveys to find out, okay, what's it going to cost to retain the shipyard building? And I think as part of a CEC negotiation, as part of a rezoning, we can address the cost of that. But they need a window of opportunity. So we can work with the equestrian community, design safe streets, put horses back on the property that don't exist now. I mean, yes, there are barns and stables, but they're vacant. And we can run it that way. But I think the honorable thing to do is to open the window to some change. Celtic can withdraw the application, and we can start fresh with public involvement and technical studies. But really, the message we got back from the city was, well, you're caught. You can't. LC needs to change it. There's no city policy to support this. So maybe with that, I'll turn it over to council. I think this is a fantastic project. It's an interesting place that really should be enjoyed by everyone in Vancouver. It's an incredible amenity, and we can clean up the Fraser River shore and do a lot for ecology, green the site, as most of it's paved, and turn that back to nature and recognize Musqueam culture today and past, Japanese Canadian interests, because there was a settlement of 25 Japanese families, from the turn of the century until the Second World War. And there's an equestrian culture that we can address too. But to do that, we really need an open door to say, let's discuss how do we change and adapt this site. I think it's time. So with that, I'll turn it over and maybe answer any questions the council has.
Thanks so much. Do we? I have Councillor Bly on the queue to ask questions. Up to 5 minutes, Councillor Bly. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Mortensen, for coming to speak. Just, I hear the sort of strong desire for some opening, some open door. And a lot of the consultation and sort of reports that staff have put forth as reasons to object the application, that work hasn't been done. I'm just curious, in terms of the applicant's desire or willingness to go and sort of do that work to come back with a lot of these questions answered, I imagine is a huge cost. But I'm just wondering why that wasn't done ahead of time. Because what I see from this is that there's really no risk to this report going to the ALC, except that it's really just not supported by staff at this time. So no matter what comes back from the ALC, it won't be supported by staff. And so we have all these reasons in front of us. I just wonder if you can comment on answering some of those reasons, or is it really that you're hoping that council will sort of open that door when it's not a supported application at this time by staff?
Yeah, I think really to invest in the public process, there needs to be a window of there needs to be a possibility, and I think the response we got back was there's no possibility. There is no planning. There's no plan in place to change the agricultural designation of the site, the minimum lot sizes, not to withdraw from the agricultural land reserve, but it's the minimum lot size. There's no policy in place to support that, and you need ALC approval. So I think we need maybe to approach this with an open mind and say, well, let's consider some change. It's ultimately council's unfettered decision. But then I think Celtic can then, with that opening, then go and talk to everybody, and then do finish the rest of the studies. But I think in the absence of some sort of indication from council that this is something worth considering, I think Mrs. O'Donnell hit the nail on the head, like the chicken and egg thing, and how can you actually go forward into the public and propose something when it's just not, there's no opening.
Okay, and I appreciate that. Could you expand on the comment you made around if this application was to not go forward, what options there are within the existing zoning? I think you mentioned 3 large lots, which would be within the existing zoning in the RA1.
Right.
Could you explain a little bit more about what could happen there, or what might happen there if this wasn't to go forward? Then
there's not enough revenue to support retaining the heritage building and doing the restoration work on it. I mean, it's really there's a revenue question. How do we pay for this? There's no logic. There's no dedication. There's no land that's available to dedicate to the city, because you need that in order to get the 3 lots. There's no requirement to dedicate the foreshore. You have to set back from the Fraser Shore, but there's no requirement for public access through it. So you get 3 giant properties with 3 giant houses, and maybe some stables, maybe not. There's nothing that compels the future owner to put a stable or horses on there. They could let it sit fallow, but in this case, I think Celtic wants to do something quite exceptional, which is to retain. I talked to Michael Klippner of the Vancouver Heritage Commission, and he really supports the idea of retaining the shipyard building. Clearly, it's a heritage asset for the city.
Does he support? Okay, well, I don't want you to speak for someone else, but I imagine looking at anything in isolation, there's a lot to support down there. I'm very familiar with the site.
Yeah.
This one last context question is around the Vancouver plan and holding off from this until we're able to sort of see that plan at least into greater detail than we do now. Is it worth waiting?
I don't think. No. The Vancouver plan is a citywide plan. This is a very specific a very specific question on a very specific part of the city. I don't think the Vancouver plan has much to other than affordable housing.
Sorry, we're at 5 minutes, not 5 o'clock. 5 minutes. And I'm going to move on to Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Kirby-Young, up to 5, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just have one clarification question, if I can, Mr. Mortensen. And you made a comment. You said you looked for that signal from council, and then you said we could withdraw the ALC application and do the work. I was just a bit confused by that and the sequencing of what you were suggesting. Can you clarify what you meant, what you intended there for me?
Sure. Well, what I heard from Mr. Murray was that really council has two options, which is either to approve, send a decision to the ALC that they approve the subdivision application, or they submit something that to the effect that they reject it. I think maybe there's a third way where the applicant just basically writes in and says we'd like to withdraw it at this time.
I'm not following you in terms of withdrawal. You're still asking for approval, because we have a choice in front of us at this moment. Potentially, which is the staff recommendation not to proceed and forward the recommendation to the ALR, or council could theoretically reject that and support forwarding it. So I'm just trying to be clear, if you are advocating obviously for the latter, but would, in that event the council did that, would you be withdrawing your ALC application? I'm still not clear on the statement.
I mean, we could do that if council doesn't want to either accept or reject the application, then Celtic can withdraw it, and then but I think what Celtic needs is a window of opening to say let's consider this, but let's do Celtic is happy to do the public involvement and happy to, they've got the technical studies that they've been doing, and it's a question of what's the sequence of these things.
Okay, so
and I think that
in a different way, from your perspective, would also be helpful to you if in the options before us, I'm not advocating for either of them, I'm just walking through. So in the option that council did elect to forward this to the ALC, would your client not be wanting to get also a similar signal of acceptance from the ALC, that there was a potential of the project to move forward? Maybe I can frame the question that way.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if council said, yes, in principle, we support the subdivision, subject to, a full consultation and rezoning application and the concurrence of Metro, that would be the ideal. I think Celtic is just looking for a place, where to start. And the advice from staff was, well, you need an ALC application. You need, ultimately they hold the key. So,
okay, and one follow-up question: why? What was the rationale or sort of the strategy in landing on subdivision into this specific number of lots and offering this type of homes? Where's the thinking on that?
It's a great question. So if we took the lot sizes that were achieved on the Musqueam subdivision just to the east of us, where the old cannery used to be, that would yield 10 lots, bigger ones. If you take the Deering Island as the template, that yields the 18 lots. So these are immediate neighboring properties that have this, the same environmental conditions, the same location on the Fraser River. They were all achievable and completed, and so those were the templates that sort of guided the lot sizes.
Okay.
It's a question. It's parity.
Did you entertain any? Did the client entertain any other options, or they were sort of just guided by sort of the contextual relations and in terms of
I think they went. Yeah, I think they went through a lot of different options, but then I think those are the immediate neighboring properties. I think they wanted to respect the semi-rural. I mean, they're guided by the Southlands Plan as well. Is semi-rural character of the area. It's not exactly a place where you would be building multifamily housing. It's sort of on the edge of the city. It's not richly served by transit. And I think the neighbors would be fairly upset if you were to do multifamily, which generates a lot of traffic, because so they're trying to be sensitive to the location.
We're up to 5.
Yeah,
we're just at the end of the 5 minutes there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mortensen.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Councillor Carr. Up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mortensen, for coming to speak to us. I'm just wanting to follow up on one of the statements you made that you are, or the client is willing to meet the city's requirements regarding flood levels or flood construction levels. So regarding that, I'm just reading an article that says, global sea level rise was about up to 16 centimeters in the 20th century, but I'm just quoting, even if sharp, immediate cuts happen to carbon emissions, it could rise another 0.5 meters, but under higher emission scenarios, 21st century rise may approach or in the extreme exceed 2 meters in the case of early onset Antarctic ice sheet instability. There's a lot of data that's showing that the Antarctic is in fact becoming increasingly unstable. So if we were to approve this, if you were to meet whatever we have now as a flood construction level, and I wonder if the plans on your part would be, or if the rights on your client's part would be that you met the levels now, but despite whatever happens in the future, it's then the city's responsibility to ensure that your lands are protected.
So, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Even if you meet certain flood level construction levels now, if a situation were to change due to rapidly accelerating climate change and ocean levels were to rise significantly, is it your knowledge that the lands that may be developed now would have to be protected by the agency, in this case the city that approved the flood construction levels at this level? So in other words, you would be, or the development would be off the hook in terms of responsibility. It would be our responsibility as a city because, the unforeseen of how high the sea levels go is not your fault. It's, we should have known better as a city in terms of designing our flood construction levels.
I think Mr. Murray answered that question when talking about if you meet the Vancouver Building Bylaw flood control level, and you're issued a notice that water could rise higher, it's at your risk. I think he was pretty declarative about that. It's the owner's risk, and that risk would then be disclosed to any future owner. So no, the city wouldn't be on the hook at the end of the day.
Okay. If that's your opinion, I will ask staff or verify with staff again about that. Thank you. That's just my only question.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Dominato. Up to 5. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Are you talking to me, Mr. Mayor? Councillor DiGenova?
Councillor Dominato.
Oh, okay.
Nope, Councillor Dominato.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, go right ahead. Up to 5.
Thanks, Mayor, and sorry for that. And hi, Mr. Mortensen. Thanks for calling in. Thank you for elaborating on sort of the vision and connecting the dots around what's proposed and the existing Southlands plan. I do see some synergies there, and I'm just wondering if you could elaborate for me in bringing this forward now at this time. Do you think there was an opportunity to do some preliminary engagement prior to having this come to council? I'm the one that asked the questions that staff elaborated on earlier, and in preparation for this. I'm just curious if that was something that was contemplated.
Yeah, well, the public record, vis-a-vis the city's letter to Celtic in the summer of this year, was that they were pretty declarative that they do not support any change to the land use in this on this site. That there is no city policy to support it, and further that we needed an ALC change to the lot size within the RA zone to achieve what Celtic thought might be a win-win for the city and for the owner of the property. So you put yourself in that position, and I think it'd be very awkward for a company to go out and run any kind of public involvement process when the city's basically said no. It doesn't seem fair. I think really what you need is an honest opening to with open minds to consider how we might change the land use on this site. We were given a pretty declarative no from planning, and it's pretty awkward to go out to the public and say, hey, we'd like to change the land use on this site, when in fact there's absolutely no opening given by planning staff.
Okay. No, fair point.
It is awkward.
I guess maybe if there's maybe a different type of conversation around that with staff, then there could have maybe been some engagement. I'm not sure. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around it, to be perfectly frank. So, and obviously, as you know, and staff noted, there's multiple layers in terms of jurisdiction here. So, I don't have any further questions. You were very clear in your comments. I really appreciate your articulation of sort of the opportunities and some of the challenges as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor DeGenova. Up to 5 minutes.
Thanks. My apologies, Mr. Mayor. When Councillor Dominato didn't answer, I thought you were calling on me.
No problem.
Mr. Mortensen, I understand that a number of the questions that I had before are more appropriately directed at you. So my apologies for the analogy, but I only have 5 minutes. So I'm just wondering, chicken and egg, is that what has brought you here without a robust consultation, without have already undergoing robust consultation, that you wanted to make sure that doing that without speaking with council first was the right way forward? Is that what I'm hearing from you? Tell me if I'm incorrect.
Yeah, I think we really did need, we couldn't consult until we have some sort of open door. I think to be clear, Celtic wants to do a really full public involvement process, but we do need the open door.
Okay, and I mean, you had talked about some planned conversations that you have with different stakeholders and the community. Do you see a possible way forward? Possibilities that perhaps you and the applicant, because although you were stated as the owner, you're representing the owner. I'm assuming.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm wondering if you're open to other ways forward, like collaborative conversation.
Absolutely.
If Musqueam was to come to you with an idea, or Southlands Riding Club, or the Japanese Canadian Society.
100%.
Great. Thanks so much. That helps to answer that question. And then right now, to a follow up to another councillor's question about sea level rise. Right now, I mean, it would technically, in looking at the heritage property that is currently sitting there, the shipyards building, what would happen to that, or what is going to continue to happen to that if nothing moves forward on this site?
Well, the building needs a lot of work. It's a beautiful building, but the building was built close to the water for a purpose, because the boats would come right up to the shore, and the folks repairing them could literally drag the boat into the shed. So it's exposed. It's a wood structure. I forget the exact age of it, but I mean, it's getting up there. in the absence of any kind of serious maintenance or capital investment, it's going to fall down, and which would be a shame because it's a really interesting building. I mean, look at the pictures that we sent in of the workshop. And to answer a question about the other buildings, there's another fantastic building with really beautiful wood trusses that, for example, could be a fantastic stable. That, if you're thinking of it being imaginative about how you could reuse and adapt the site and preserve those really nice buildings, that would be another kind of win. But without investment, that building will fall down.
And the housing that may be proposed isn't, as you said, multifamily residential housing, but would it be more affordable than what we see there today in that area?
No, I think these are houses on large pieces of property. They'll be relatively big homes. I don't think you could call them affordable. Let's be honest about it. They're going to be.
I'm not saying affordable.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I said more affordable. Would they be
Oh.
smaller lots? Do you have any plans, or you're not that far down the road?
Yeah, we're definitely not that far down the road. But what Celtic is interested in is keeping artists and artisans on site, and is explicitly interested in creating some artist live work studios that would be, again, very affordable for local artists who want to live and work on the site. It would be a real win.
Right
now? I think there's a painter who's just left. There's a metalworks company that does work there too, and there've been various artists in and out of there over the years. But I think really only 2 at this moment.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's my time. I don't have time to ask you any more questions, but I understand a little better now why you're here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, and that's it for questions from Council, and thanks very much for coming in today. Okay, Council, we'll need somebody to move the report.
I'll move the report.
I'll move.
I think I heard Councillor Hardwick first, and then Councillor Boyle. If you're good enough to second it, we'll have the report moved, and I'll go to the main queue for folks if you want to talk about this. I'll just remind Council that we've been at this for an hour and a half. It is the first item on our agenda. I know people are pretty keen to get notices of motion and inquiries and other stuff done, but we have just 2.5 hours left to finish our agenda. So, okay, Councillor Swanson.
I'll move the report.
Oh no, it's already been moved and seconded. Okay. So, folks want to get on the queue, then.
I don't have anything to say. I'm going to vote for the report.
Okay, Councillor Carr, up to 5 minutes.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I do have some questions to staff, if that's okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Points of information, yep.
Points of information, that's right. First of all, I want to know about the compatibility of this higher density with the equestrian use in the area, and if there's any consideration around that density in terms of the impact, traffic impact on the equestrian community in the surrounding area. First, that's my first question.
Over to staff.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. We have to do further investigation on this, as we're recommending that this is not to proceed. We'd have to do some further investigation with all the other stuff.
Okay, and in terms of, all right, I understand that. In terms of the 18-lot subdivision, I wonder if staff could comment around how this fits in, obviously with the local area plan, but just in general, or in this particular area, given the risks that staff have identified regarding sea level rise.
Thanks, Councillor Carr. I'll pass that to Susan Hayes.
Thank you. We would want to assess that further, but certainly from an ecological perspective and a climate adaptation perspective, having larger lots and greater ecological function for resiliency is a good thing. And so we would anticipate that smaller lots would would impact that. And that would really, when we were speaking earlier on about the rationale of looking at the area with all of the current objectives, we would want to evaluate based on that. Our initial sense would be it would have an impact on that resiliency ability.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. That's clear. Ms. Haid, I wonder if you can also tell me if there's any policy basis for us to consider this particular application.
No, there currently, as outlined in the staff report, we do not have a current policy that enables the smaller lot subdivision in the Southlands area that's consistent with the zone.
Right. Thank you. Those are my questions. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. If I could turn the chair over to Councillor Kirby-Yung, because I have just a few things to say on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thanks. Okay, a couple things. I'm going to vote to support the staff report here. I kind of sympathize with the applicant because this is an extremely regulated piece of land that became more regulated by adding in this step through council. So I understand how difficult it is, and it's a bit of a quandary about how you do anything here other than what it's currently regulated for. I guess I want to say though, what is the path forward for me? So I'm going to vote yes to the staff report. But if next time you came forward and staff recommended the same thing, but you had Chief Wayne Sparrow standing beside you saying this meets all our objectives of reconciliation, and you had a very, very strong partner from Musqueam with you, then I would be much more tempted to vote for this. The thing is, this is really an extraordinary ask of the city. I think this is, there's a lot of things for us to consider, and so in order to be it's an extraordinary ask. So I think it would have to be an extraordinary offer. I think that it can't, preserving some heritage sites is a good thing, but I think it would have to go above and beyond the considerations that I'm just speaking for myself because I'm just one vote, but it has to go above and beyond the what would be ordinary, and for me it would be reconciliation that would be at the heart of that. So for what that's worth, you kind of know what it would take to get my vote to move forward, and then you'd have to go through the ALR and through the rezoning and all that stuff. So it's pretty daunting, but I did want to give you some indication of where my mind is. I guess the third thing I would say on this is this council, this is a really good example for us of what happens when development propositions come to us without a lot of staff input. We have a lot of complaining that it takes a long time to get through staff processes, but this is a very wide open proposition where there hasn't been much consultation. And so where I, of course, put forward a motion to waive to make LOEs voluntary, if we want more of these things to come like this, there's a possibility that we could do that. So I think it's been a really good learning experience for me on that. And I think a great question from council. I thank the applicant for coming forward, but I'll be supporting the staff report in this. Thanks. Can I take the chair back?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks. Councillor DeGenova, up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, can you indulge me because I was thinking almost the same thing as you, and that I think that was probably highlighted in some of my questions. And I'm just wondering, Mr. Mayor, instead of just sending this in, I'm just wondering if I were to move something that supported the staff recommendations but stated and added that council affirms support for the staff recommendations on this item, and that council asks staff to communicate to the applicant that council would reconsider this after consultation with the Musqueam, the Japanese Canadian Society, the Southlands Riding Club, and the community. I'm just wondering, I didn't want to send that in and start a whole amendment process through you and a point of information to try and expedite things here. Would that be welcome?
Thanks, Councillor DeGenova. I actually have been talking a lot about a similar thing,
Sorry.
And I can just let you know, and then we can go back to law if you want. But basically, the applicant has the right to come back to us anytime they want. It's not like a motion that we have to wait a year. So my understanding, and perhaps we can go to law for that. But so the applicant can go back to staff and talk to them. And so I don't know if there has to be anything attached to it, and I don't even know if we can legally attach anything to our decision. But perhaps I can we can go to law to see. Are we allowed to attach anything, or does it have to be just a straight support or reject the staff report?
Sorry, it's Grant Murray with the Law Department. I agree with what you said, that they could come back again. There would be application fees again, and that so that may stop anybody from proceeding, although they're not that substantial. I don't see why you couldn't attach some conditions, provided that it was still determined that this was not to be forwarded to the Agricultural Land Commission, and that this proposal was halted. I would try to avoid watering down the rejection, but if there's some doorway that you want to crack open for this applicant to consider, I don't think that would be improper or unlawful.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dejanova, is that enough for you?
Yes, it is. And actually, I am going to send something in, Mr. Mayor, and maybe you will want to amend the amendment to make it legally correct. But it's about that. I just feel like what I heard from Mr. Mortensen, and I'm happy to put this in, and then, I'm really hoping, Mr. Mayor, that this won't be called out of order. That's why I'm not asking for a recess here. I'm not sure if I'd even get one, but it's an amendment in that spirit, exactly what Mr. Murray has just said. And I'm just gonna send it in. My apologies. I've been writing here while I just wanted to, maybe we could move to an amendment queue if that's all right, if it gets seconded.
The only thing I would say, Councillor Dejanova, is of course everything we're saying here is on public record, and
of course.
So that may be enough for the applicant, but we can't really ask at this point. So have you sent in? So I'm just going to go by the book here.
I have
so you
sent
have.
It in.
Okay, and so can staff pull that up on screen? It's coming up now. I've just stopped your clock, Councillor Dejanova, while we get this up.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Well, it's a new process, so we're just trying to figure this all out. So, okay. Okay, so council's had a chance to read this. Do we have a seconder for this motion? Don't hear a seconder, Councillor Dejanova, so I'm going to start your clock again. If you have any closing remarks, please go ahead.
I thought maybe I did.
Sorry, I'll second.
Yeah.
Let's try to get mute.
Okay, we're on an amendment queue now.
Oh.
Anybody?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
I was moving this in the spirit of, I do want to, just as you were saying, Mr. Mayor, and I was kind of just drafting up some comments, even a question to staff, but my time came quicker than I thought it might on the queue here. Just to try and be brief, I heard Mr. Mortensen say that they were looking for a signal like this. Maybe this meeting and the recording of it is enough. And, me stating exactly the same thing as you, that if they came back after consultation with all of those community groups, and, with a plan to revitalize and restore the heritage of the shipyards building, that it would be a real shame to see go, and maybe hand in hand with, the Vancouver heritage, commission and other stakeholders, especially the neighborhood. And I have to say, I used to ride for some time and spend some time actually riding in my teenage years at Southlands, and I have a lot of respect not only for the equine activities there, but the agricultural land and the neighborhood, the community, the feel of the community. That being said, I wonder if we're leaving something on the table here, if there's a possibility that this possible application, as you've stated, Mr. Mayor, if red tape could be cut and there was a different way to do this, if there could be some type of partnership, especially first and foremost with the Musqueam, I agree with you, but maybe that can't even move forward unless they had some support from council that we weren't just rejecting an application. So that's the reason. It says very clearly in what I'm trying to do in my amendment. And, Mr. Mayor, I'd invite you and ask you, please, 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 to amend it to the correct legal language if it needs to be, or just call it out of order. But I'm just trying to find a way forward to allow them to go and talk to Musqueam if that's indeed what they need to do that, because I understand that there is a large financial risk that's undertaken. And, perhaps this is something that we will hear from Musqueam they wanted to do, and the applicant just won't want to put forward that type of capital, knowing that council had rejected it once. So for that reason, that's why I'm moving this forward, and just wanted to explain to council what the spirit of the amendment was. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Carr, up to 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's impossible for me to support this. It's not a complete sentence. It says to staff communicate with the applicant that until such time that consultation was undertaken, then normally there is a subclause to that. There's no subclause. I don't understand what this is about, so I cannot support it.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other councillors on the queue, so I'm going to call a vote on this one. Councillor Dejanova? Councillor Dejanova, we're looking for your vote.
Mr. Mayor, I was on the queue before you had called the vote. I'm having a connection issue, and I was hoping to withdraw the motion, but I suppose you've called the vote, so I'll just vote in favor.
Okay, thanks. If staff can pull it up on screen, that has failed with Councillor Kirby, Young, Bly, Boyle, Weeb, Hardwick, Swanson, Fry, Carr, and myself in opposition. Okay, let's go back to the queue. Did you have anything else, Councillor Dejanova?
I just want to make it clear what my intention was, and Mr. Mayor, to the statements that I personally, and instead of calling a point of privilege, will just use my time to share. I feel that they're belittling and demeaning to state that something that I had already stated, that I was putting this together.
Sorry, is this a point of order?
I did not. No, this is my time, Mr. Mayor. I'm stating that I was trying my very best to put something forward that would possibly bring together the community and some possibilities to look at heritage revitalization and opportunities for the Southlands Riding Club, the Japanese Canadian Society, all of the stakeholders, and first and foremost and most importantly, the Musqueam. So it's quite disheartening to me, Mr. Mayor, when someone, belittles the way that I have put something forward when they themselves have done that before, and I have held my tongue. Thank you.
Hey, Councillor Weep, up to 5 minutes.
I think that this is a very interesting project. I think this process is difficult. I think there's obviously some really important ecologically sensitive areas and the habitat that could be restored, which I think is a project we should look at. I think with Metro Vancouver, I sit on the regional parks, and we have looked at improving this greenway connection to connect the Fraser, called Experience the Fraser. I also think the heritage building has some beautiful components to it. I do think there's some work to be done, and I will be supporting staff's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr.
You
Mayor.
just have 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. For sure, I am supporting staff's recommendation. The area is outside the urban containment boundary, and it's, Metro Vancouver does not. I mean, it's in our regional contact statement, and that's registered with the regional growth strategy with Metro Vancouver. And I've been there when votes have happened around areas outside the urban containment boundary for increased densification. And there's an incredible focus and commitment on the part of Metro Vancouver to not tamper with the agricultural lands outside that urban containment boundary. The second point is that the city does not have policy that would in fact support this or even be a context for this kind of proposal. So I can't see supporting it at even going forward for potential development later. It does not make sense to me. And finally, in terms of the ecological risk, I think it's very high in this area. It concerns me a great deal about any of the development that has already happened down there, and the risk that we are facing as a city because of the rapid and accelerating pace of climate change and the anticipated sea level rise, which scientists are certainly indicating as new science comes forward is only going to be much, much worse than people predicted even a few years ago. So I'm not prepared to even anticipate or look at increased level of investment and development in an area of very high risk in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor, and offer a few comments, just some reflection. Appreciate the patience that staff have had with us, the applicant. There was a lot of questions. I know I did a lot of reading and sent some questions in advance because this was a new process for all of us. Certainly in seeing the proposal was really drawn to largely the dedication of 50% of the acreage to park space and green space, and the commitment around restoration to the shoreline, as well as the commitment around the shipyard building and the heritage component. I thought those were some really great opportunities being presented that did align with some of the Southlands plan. Also had a really constructive conversation with a member of the Ratepayers Association as well from the community, representing some of the community interests around the history of the area and the planning documents and considerations around the equestrian use. And so that was also helpful. One of some of the key questions I had asked staff prior coming to this meeting was around the consultation with the Musqueam Nation, the Japanese Canadian community, the broader neighborhood and community associations, and those answers were presented. And one of the things that stood out to me was the archaeological component, and having been involved with a very thorny secondary school development in New Westminster, which that took many years to get off the ground. And as that project evolved, I discovered a midden and other issues. That was very top of mind for me. But I have to express my frustration around it. There's no fault in this frustration around just process. For me, I would have liked to have come into this having a better sense of the public considerations, and I think that speaks to what I think a number of councillors have addressed this evening, including you, Mayor, around the understanding kind of where the Musqueam are on this, the Japanese Canadian community. I reached out to members of the Japanese Canadian community, and I understand that they certainly are always open to partnership and interested in this area, and because of the history, but they also support more investigation and support the staff recommendation at this time, at least those I spoke to. And so I guess that's where I would leave things, is I really would have liked to see more sort of public engagement on the front end to be able to consider this more duly. And so it's just been challenging. I want to respect that there is a community plan there that hasn't been looked at obviously in many years. And so I'll be supporting the staff recommendation this evening, but I just wanted to reflect there was many things that I was thinking about in the context of all of this. And appreciate the questions from all of my colleagues. It's been very informative, and the discussion and the applicant. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Hardwick. up to 5.
Thank you. There is so little agricultural land left in the region, and this is just a tiny sliver within the city of Vancouver. And once it's gone, it's gone. It's never coming back again. And we have to keep that in mind. There's a reason that we have reserve lands, and that is because there is scarcity. We are not going to grow any larger in terms of land area. Councillor Carr, I think, articulated quite well the considerations around the floodplain. This is a very vulnerable piece of land, and that should be taken into consideration, notwithstanding the fact that we would never get agricultural land back again. So on balance, I just can't see cutting it up into making what amount to more mansions down on the flats, even if there is going to be a smattering of artist studios or things of that nature. So despite the fact that there is no this is an anomaly, as has been stated, I'm going to support, as may come as a surprise, I'm going to support the staff recommendations on this as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Council. That's it for speakers. So I'm going to call the vote on this item. Councillor Bly.
I'm just there we go.
Okay, that has passed with Councillor Dejanova in opposition. Thanks, Council.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
My apologies. I had clicked in favor. I would like to ask for a vote of reconsideration if that's what it takes. I did say that I would support the staff recommendations. I was very clear in my comments.
Sure, we have a motion for reconsideration. Do we have a seconder for that?
Second, Councillor Carr.
Thanks. So we'll have to have a vote on the reconsideration so I could get staff to...
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. My panel's not working so well.
What would you like to do then? Would you like to vote assist? Or...
Yes, if you could, just because last time I did vote in favor.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Vote assist in favor of the reconsideration then?
In favor of the reconsideration, and if that passes, in favor of the staff recommendations, please.
Okay. Councillor Fry, Councillor Carr. Okay, that passes with none in opposition. So we're going to go now revote on the staff report. Let's wait first.
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I think I'm just waiting. Staff, I haven't voted, so I think you need to reset the vote.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. That's my point of privilege.
There we go. Okay. Okay. Okay, Council, so that has passed unanimously. Okay, we're 5 to 8 now. We are moving on to the next item, but before we do, I think we should just take 5 minutes if we could. So let's come back at 8 o'clock and we'll start. We'll be looking at the referral, the held referral motions. See you at 8. before we get to all the rest is let's see now.
Mayor Stewart, I just want to make sure we have a quorum.
Okay, referral report 6. Okay, Council, we're moving on to the next item on the agenda. That was the held referral report. Councillor Hardwick held the report. So if Councillor Hardwick, you want to put yourself on the list to ask questions to staff? There you go. Up to 5, just check with the city manager. We have staff in place to answer questions on this.
Mayor Stewart, yes, we do.
We do. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, Councillor Hardwick, away you go. 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much. So staff, section 13.2 of procedures bylaw says that council may ask questions of staff related to the decision to refer a proposed bylaw to public hearing. So my questions then are about the decision to refer. And I'm assuming that staff felt that they had made the decision to refer based on their interpretation of consistency with the MERP guideline. So therefore, my question number 1 is regarding the MERP guideline. I am looking at section 3G, additional floor area for 4M zones. I'm sure you have that document. In column 1, it states that 100% secured market rental projects, quote, consider redevelopment of sites with no existing rental housing. That is clear. For projects which contain at least 20% of the residential floor area's moderate income rental housing in column 2, quote, consider redevelopment of a limited number of highly underutilized sites with low number of existing tenants, building with a maximum of 3 existing rental units. So, how did staff come up with the number of maximum of 3 existing rental units? And how does this site qualify as there are 6 rental units and 13 tenants on the site?
Okay, Councillor, I'm just going to make sure we're just having a little audio problems with the city manager. So just going to stop your clock. And so is the city manager, your audio working now? Nope, not yet. Have you done the infamous double mute? Okay, Council, we're just going to take a second as the city manager has to log back in. I guess he's having, so if we can we'll just hold here. And I'll, of course, keep your clock paused, Councillor Hardwick.
Mayor Stewart, it's Paul Mokry here. Are you able to hear me now?
I can now. Yep.
Excellent.
Did the trick.
Very sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, I'm gonna. You've heard the question from Councillor Hardwick?
I did, and I will ask staff to weigh in. I think the concern that we've got generally here, Council, obviously on referral to public hearing, is detailed questions about policy and compliance, the extent to which the application applies or complies with policy, are appropriately addressed at the public hearing. And I know this is a kind of challenging construct that we're working in here, but if I understood the question, and again, I'll defer to staff to pull me out of the fire here if they disagree, but what I heard Councillor Hardwick ask was a question around compliance with policy. So we would say that's a matter that's appropriately addressed at the public hearing.
However, since we're assuming that staff made the decision to refer based on their interpretation of consistency with the guidelines, this is surely, I mean, it's a cart and horse situation. Staff should not be bringing forward projects if they are not compliant with guidelines or have an explanation for why they should not be regarding those guidelines before they bring things forward to public hearing.
Okay, that's so. Is there a question there, Councillor Hardwick? I mean,
Well,
it's the same question.
I made the question. So my point is that it's not compliant. So I'll move on to my second question.
Councillor Hardwick, maybe I can say, and staff, Ms. O'Donnell can speak to this as well, as staff's assessment is that the application is compliant with policy.
I'm going to stop your clock here, Councillor Hardwick. Just to help here a little bit. The last report we just looked at, staff recommended we wouldn't go ahead because it was not compliant with policy. So whether or not it's compliant or a reason to bring it ahead doesn't mean that staff can't bring it ahead. So I don't know if that helps you or not, but that's kind of how I read it.
Well, that's pretty concerning, but that's what you're saying. Then I will suggest that that's something that needs some pretty serious rethinking. Question 2, what is the downside of giving the applicant and the community a short period of time to put together an alternative scheme together? The spirit of pilots is to experiment and figure out what is successful and what is not. So the consideration of alternatives is in keeping with the objective of the pilot project analysis. So again, what is the downside of giving a short period longer to bring this further along?
Thanks, Councillor. I'll have Ms. O'Donnell speak to that.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. This is Teresa, and thank you for the question, Councillor Hardwick. I'd like to maybe take a shot at both of those questions. The applicant has indicated that they do want to go forward at this time. They have been talking with the neighborhood. I believe you got a letter to that effect from the applicant that they do want to go forward at this time. In terms of the whether or not it complies with policy, that's a great question, and it's actually a really great debate to have at the public hearing. As you see on, almost all of our zoning cases, policy is a matter of interpretation, and that is a discussion that the public likes to engage in. They sometimes agree with us, they sometimes don't agree with us, but that is a great public dialogue that should be happening at the public hearing.
One could argue otherwise, that why bother having policies and compliance at all? Just go straight to public hearing. So I can get into the nitty gritty of why this is not compliant with the policy, and it's quite clear on the page. But since I don't seem to be getting far down that path, I have an amendment or a motion that I have circulated. And
we'd have to move it first. So you have.
Then I guess I'll have to.
Councillor DeGenova.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Hardwick, did you?
Thank you, Councillor DeGenova. I'll second it then, and then okay. I have circulated an amendment. Okay,
thanks. Okay, so it has been moved and seconded, so we're on the main queue, and then we can put you on the Councillor DeGenova.
Mayor Stewart, sorry to interrupt.
Wait, sorry, clerks, sorry.
We should be in the amendment queue. We're just going to move that over now.
Yeah, and it still says Balaclava Street too.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Okay, great. So, Councillor Hardwick, if you want to, have you sent the text into the clerks?
Yeah, I did. It should have gone in before our
They're just doing
break.
some Yep, they're just doing some adjustments there. So we'll get the amendment pulled up on the screen before I start your clock, and then we can have a discussion about it?
Sure, and it's quite simple because I do think that this project, from what we've heard, and this has gone to all of council, is that there has been an active dialogue ongoing, and there was progress being made. And so this is recommending that council direct staff to bring the report to council meeting on February 23rd for council consideration of referral to public hearing. So just really buying a month's time to delay this referral to public hearing in consideration of a lot of outstanding issues, and I think some goodwill that could be built on this project given just a few more weeks.
Okay, thanks so much. So do we have a seconder for this?
I'll second Fry.
Okay. Just 1 second here, Councillor Fry. Clerks, am I in the wrong queue here still? Did I move it to the wrong place?
No, this is correct, Mayor Surratt.
Okay, so right. So Councillor Harbeck, is there anything else on this?
Oops. Yeah, just as I've said, all of council has received correspondence about this, and from former city staff and planning and also in the region, very knowledgeable people. And I think that there's been significant progress made. And, the indication that I have, that together with the fact that I think there are legitimate questions about compliance with the guidelines, putting it off for a month and putting it on the next council meeting's referral schedule, I think would be a move in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Councillor DeGenova?
Thanks. I had a point of information.
Okay. Please go ahead.
I was just wondering if through you to, Mr. Mokry or Ms. O'Donnell or whoever would like to answer this, if on page 3 of the referral report, or I should say the policy report, it's both really, that the 14 policies that are listed under council authority and previous decisions do in fact apply to this. Moderate income rental housing pilot, RM4, RM4N district schedules, Kitsilano, RM4 guidelines, Housing Vancouver strategy. I'm just reading them out while I give staff some time.
I'm sorry, I'm a little unclear what your question is.
I'm trying to understand, because there was some question brought up by a councillor as to whether or not this met policy. I'm asking if these are the 14 policies that this indeed does meet, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, I thought it was pretty clear, but I didn't hear an answer. On page 3.
Yes, Councillor DeGenova, those are the policies that we analyzed this report, and that's the substance of the case report that you have before you tonight.
Okay, that's what I had read through. Thanks very much. I'm satisfied with that, Mr. Mayor. And
okay,
as I've moved referral, I'm happy to vote in support of referring it forward and hearing what the public has to say.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Bly?
Thanks, Mayor. I just have a question, a point of information for you, to the staff, and that is what work is likely to be done between now and February 23rd meeting that hasn't been done already that would sort of justify a referral, and there's a second part to that, perhaps.
Okay, staff, do you have a response? What kind of work might be done in that period of time?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm going to try to take a stab at this and ask Yardley to jump in if I mess anything up. I think what we heard from our applicant, though, is they have been working with the neighborhood. However, the proposal that the neighbors would like them to consider is not currently available. They don't have a policy door for that. There's not an alternative proposal for this. It's not eligible for the Rental 100, and so there is not a policy tool for them to come in with that. But Yardley, please correct me if I've misstated anything.
Good evening, Council. It's Yarda McNeil, Assistant Director of Planning for Rezoning. Teresa, you got that correctly, that there is no policy in place for this area that would allow that site to redevelop. The MERP policy is effectively the chief rental policy for the area. So any hybrid that would involve 100% market rental does not have a policy framework.
Councillor Bly, does that help?
Yes, that is helpful. So I'm not going to support the referral at this time, but I will ask staff because I raised the same question, and under the MERC pilot program document on the last page, it talks about general guidelines for additional height and density, and that's what Councillor Hardwick had brought up initially. I think that the issue is around the statement that consider redevelopment of a limited number of highly underutilized sites with a low number of existing tenants, buildings with a maximum of 3 existing rental units. And so what we have is 3 buildings with a maximum of 3 existing rental units in each building, which I think it's vague and it's not clear. And so I think between now and public hearing, if we're going to be deciding on whether or not this application meets policy, I personally would feel more comfortable with a legal memo back to council to assure us that we have in fact, or there is gray area here and we need to address that in the policy before we look at approving applications with this particular condition, because I think it's unique. It's not something we've seen come forward before. And the policy, in my view, can be interpreted 2 different ways, which is causing this issue. So I'm wondering if it's possible for us to get a legal memo back on this particular part of the policy.
So, Councillor Bly, I don't want to speak for the legal department. However, yes, we had received that question. I believe we sent a written response to the City Council on December 15th that addresses your question. We can reissue that if it's convenient, or Jeff can jump in if he needs to respond also.
Yeah, it's Jeff Greenberg from the Law Department. We could certainly give you a legal memo, but you would have to refer this back to staff for whatever direction and whatever additional information you want, with the request that it be brought back at a later date with whatever additional information you're requesting. At this point,
okay.
Yeah.
You know, that's great, and I don't have much time. In that case, I am going to support the referral, and I am doing so on the basis that I think we need a legal memo, a legal opinion about the interpretation of this particular language in the policy. So that's all from me. I'll be supporting the referral for that reason, and I hope, I don't know if we need further requests to get the legal memo, but hopefully that's registered as a request at this stage.
Probably should be a condition of the referral if.
Okay, I see Councillor Hardwick's on the queue. I will quickly submit that.
Yeah,
Councillor Hardwick, you have about just over 4 minutes.
My amendment, again, was just to delay the referral because we had choices. We could turn down, we could approve it, we could turn it down. And in this case, what I'm suggesting is that we just delay it a month before we bring it back for referral at that time. And, you know, things like what Councillor Bly was just talking about could be accomplished in that month so that we could move ahead into referral full steam ahead, you know, and all be on the same page. And it's not a huge delay that we're suggesting here.
Okay, anybody else on this item? If not, I'll call a vote on Councillor Hardwick's motion. If staff can put that back up on the screen. Councillor Kirby-Young, I see you on the queue.
Yeah, just one quick comment. I'm just noting and trying to process in my head some dissonance between what is stated and what is desired. So this simply says to bring the same report back on February 23rd.
but there is no other direction for any consultation or other work to happen in that time. And I've heard different things expressed by councillors, some to get information on a memo. There might be an amendment coming on that, some to hope that there's more dialogue between the applicant and other folks. But the language here, which is my challenge in considering it, doesn't suggest any of that. It simply says, let's decide to refer or not on a different date.
I would agree.
So I have trouble with it for that reason. I just wanted to state that for the record.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Carr.
Yes. To provide some time to Councillor Bly, I will also express my concern that the actual amendment by Councillor Hardwick does not specify that we are seeking a legal memo on a particular facet of whether or not this project meets some policy objectives or where the policy stand is on this. So yeah, I'm hoping that there will be an amendment to this amendment, and if that does come forward and the idea is to have that legal memo and it is only a 1 month delay, I would be leaning towards supporting the actual amendment as amendment.
Thanks. Councillor Hardwick, you have 3 minutes.
Well, I was trying to make this as simple as possible, but if there was elaboration on it that gave more comfort, I would be completely open to that.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Maybe this can be solved with a quick point of information through you to staff. Would this come through to public hearing without a thorough report as to what policies this did meet and why it was able to come forward if it did in fact not meet specific zoning policies? However, it did meet interim rezoning policies, the MERP rezoning policy that is a pilot. I'm just trying to give some examples. I'm just wondering, I've never seen anything come forward to public hearing without a robust answer and reports that I read. I know because there are hundreds of pages, some of them, ahead of time. So is this legal memo necessary, or will we see this if it's referred to public hearing?
And over to staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Teresa. Yes, we do believe, the planning staff, we absolutely believe that we have met the MERT policy. We understand this is a concern. We will certainly highlight that in the council presentation when the case does come to public hearing. And I might want to note that the City Council is certainly able to entertain cases that do not meet policy. Typically, if they don't meet policy, what we'll do is we'll bring an issues report forward to the council to ask for direction ahead of time, but the council is not bound by those policies. They're good to follow them, and we like to follow them, as the one previously on the agenda tonight. But in this particular instance, we are very solid that we believe we've met the policy. We can explain that, and we will explain it during the public hearing, during the staff presentation.
Thanks. And then just to follow up to that, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Sure.
I just want to make sure that right now, I actually think for a referral report, 14 council authority previous decisions and policies that do apply that are listed here on page 3. I just want to make sure that's correct. So there already are 14 policies that apply that are listed by staff.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay.
Thank you. So I'm satisfied with that. And I, even without a legal memo, because I feel that the follow-up reports that we get and all of the proper consultation, and for the very reasons that has been noted before, that staff would not recommend something to come forward, just as we saw before, if it did not meet policy, City of Vancouver policy. That being said, that's like interim rezoning policy, in my opinion. We, I guess, shouldn't approve any interim rezoning policy if we're going to need a legal memo for everything that it might meet. I keep an open mind, and I understand that this referral and
Just
voting
10
in support
seconds.
of it does not in any way fetter my decision. So I will be supporting the staff recommendations for referral, and with or without the legal memo. If others need that, I'll support it.
Thanks, Councillor Bly. You have 8 seconds.
I have an amendment.
Okay.
Been emailed to the clerk.
Okay. Do we have a seconder for the amendment?
Second.
Okay, we're on Amendment Q2. So if you want to speak to this, Councillor Bly, we can put you on. There you go. Up to 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
I don't have any new information than I shared leading up to this moment, other than to say there are times where legal has come back after being asked to look at a real specific language issue that is interpreted one way by some and interpreted another way by others, to sort of give us their expert opinion. And we do look at hundreds of these reports, and there's many objections to this particular application from community, but this particular one stood out to me as quite valid. So I'm in order to support Councillor Hardwick's referral to a month, I would need to know that we're going to get some new information potentially in that time to make that worthwhile. But I do think it's necessary to make the decision at public hearing and hear directly from legal. So that's the motion.
Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bly, for the amendment. Appreciated. I'd just like to add that there was no explanation in this report of why it has deviated from the policy, and the public won't have that explanation ahead of time. This is something that can be rectified, and I will point out that there will be no more follow-on reports after this point. So I think that's important to take into consideration, and I have a question to legal stemming from this amendment, and that is, will the legal opinion be available to the public?
It's Jeff Greenberg again, and no, the legal opinion would not be made available to the public. It would be given to counsel in either in camera or as solicitor-client privilege. And again, to reiterate what Teresa O'Donnell said earlier, council is free to approve or refer an application that meets policy or doesn't meet policy, and what planning staff would do is note if it didn't meet policy in their particular eyes, and I think that's what they've done. So we can definitely do the work that you want, but it would not be made public.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying that. Again, I still think this is important, and I'm still not satisfied on the other issue, but thank you, Councillor Bly, and I will support.
Okay, that's it for speakers on this amendment to the amendment. So I'll go to the voting queue. Councillor Kirby-Young, Councillor Swanson. Okay, and that has passed with Councillor Dominato, Boyle, Dejanova, and myself in opposition. So we're going to go back to the amendment queue. Councillor Bly, you are done your time. Councillor Dominato, up to 5 minutes on the amended amendment. Might be on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Actually, I was on for a point of information, but my question was asked.
You're done? Okay.
Yeah.
So we can go to the vote on this one.
Mr. Mayor, it's Councillor Dejanova. I'm getting an echo. Just to clarify, we are voting right now on the referral back to staff, or
that's what we're voting on.
The referral of the referral. Mr. Mayor, my buttons are very sticky right now.
Yeah.
Would you mind just marking me in opposition? Thank you.
Okay, clerks have done that. Looking for Councillor Swanson. Okay, so that referral has failed with Councillor Dominato, Boyle, Weeb, Fry, Dejanova, and myself in opposition. Okay, so we're back to the main queue. We don't have.
Could I have that on the screen, please?
Sure. Sorry about that. I know they're supposed to come up automatically, but sometimes it
disappeared too
It's
quickly
not automated.
there.
Yeah, it's not automated, so it's.
Clerk, could we have it back?
Yep. Hopefully it's. I can see it on the screen behind the clerks. We have been having that trouble about getting it up, but I was getting it up on the public screen. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much. All right. We're now on the main queue, so I don't have anybody there. So I'll call a vote on the referral. Just have clerks clear the screen and so this is if you want to follow the recommendations in the staff report.
Or can we have it on screen for clarity, or I just want to be clear on what we're voting on, Mr. Mayor. I guess it's point of privilege.
Yeah, we're just voting on the staff report recommendations that this be referred to public hearing. The original recommendation.
I admit to being off. Is that because the referral to staff failed?
That's right. Yep. So there was, I mean, we're in the middle of the vote, but we were, Councillor Hardwick had moved to amend to refer it, come back to this in a month. That was defeated, and so now we're voting on the original unamended staff report.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
No problem at all. It's all been a long day. Okay, so that has passed with Councillor Kirby-Young and Councillor Hardwick in opposition. Okay, Council, so that's the end of that item. We're going on to the next item, which is referral report number 7, which was also held by Councillor Hardwick. So I'll go to the question queue.
So moved, Councillor DeGenova.
What? Sorry, no, we have questions first to Councillor Hardwick.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's okay. Up to 5 minutes, Councillor Hardwick, whenever you're ready.
Yes, again, I'm looking at looking at this is 1766 Francis Street, and this is from my analysis is inconsistent with the community plan and also goes against the Citizens Assembly report. So here we have another example where an application is coming forward that is in contravention of existing community plans, and in fact, in this case, even the Citizens Assembly.
Okay. So we have this is questions at this point.
The question is, how can we be bringing this forward to public hearing when it is clearly in contravention of underlying policies that are significant policies?
Okay, and that's to staff. I imagine we're going to hear this same type of thing, but perhaps we
just
go to
begs the question: why have policies?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move the motion.
Oh, we're not right there yet because we're having questions from Councillor Hardwick. Yep,
my apologies.
So we're going to, sorry, Councillor Legenova. Councillor Hardwick has the floor, and there's been a question asked to staff about policies and consistency. I mean, to be similar to the last issue, but if staff wants to weigh in here, that would be proper thing.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Stewart. I think the fundamental questions are similar, but I would defer to Ms. O'Donnell if she's got any additional comments she wants to provide.
Thank you, City Manager. Yes, and again, I'll ask Yardley to keep me on the right side here. This one, I think we often see when we bring applications in the Grandview Woodland, a debate and a great public dialogue with the community about how they interpret those policies. And again, they don't have to agree with staff. They can interpret those policies, but again, that's the important reason that why that dialogue should happen during the public hearing. so that everyone has a chance to express their views and the council can weigh all of that information at the same time. So I would say kind of the same we did before. We think this is a very good conversation to have during the public hearing,
So
and not during when people aren't allowed and the public is not allowed to speak.
So what do you say to the people that spent countless volunteer hours on these plans? I know you weren't here, Ms. O'Donnell, but the Grandview Woodlands Plan was a significant effort, and the Citizens Assembly was highly controversial. A lot of work went into this, and we're not talking about an insignificant deviance.
Councillor Hardwick, we are on a very narrow topic right here, so not on, going back and,
But in this particular instance, that's the difference between 6 and 9 stories, which is not insignificant. And
Sure.
it begs the question, why are we coming in with referrals to public hearing on projects that are substantially deviating from significant community efforts? It has to be asked, this question, because it is undermining the trust in the community.
Look, the other thing, Councillor Hardwick, is we have significant quasi-judicial responsibilities under the public hearing law of the province, and that's why I think you're getting a consistent answer from staff, is that because we pass a policy, it doesn't mean we're bound to follow it. We're not breaking any law if we don't. So that's why we kind of have to hash it out at a public hearing.
Well, maybe not a law, but the public trust.
Well, that's right, and that's exactly why it should be at a public hearing, because we'll suffer politically either way, and I think that's really what this thing is for. So that's my 2 cents. Any other questions on slightly narrower on this one?
Well, again, I can cite the exact examples. This is not compliant with the policies, and it is undermining public trust by continuing to do these things.
Okay. More of a statement there, and once the motion's moved, of course, there's lots of room for debate on this. So I'll go to Councillor Dejanova.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move the motion, if possible, for referral with staff recommendations.
Okay. Okay, do we have a seconder for that?
Second.
Okay, thanks. So we're in the main queue now. If you'd like to speak to this referral, please.
I would, but can I ask a point of information? It may feel like deja vu, Mr.
Sure,
Mayor.
yeah, please
But
do.
On page 2 of the report, to the 11 council authority previous decisions, including the Grandview Woodland Plan, City of Vancouver Reconciliation Framework, Housing Vancouver Strategy, High Density Housing for Families with Children Guidelines, Green Buildings Policy for Rezonings, Urban Forest Strategies, I'm almost done, Community Amenity Contributions, Public Art Policy and Procedures for Rezone Developments, Tenant Relocation Protection Policy, Vancouver Development Cost Levy Bylaw, and last but not least, the Vancouver Utilities Development Cost Bylaw. Did they all comply with policy? If I could ask that through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, that's my only question.
Okay, if staff could answer that point of information.
Certainly be happy to. Yes, those are the policies under which we analyze the application, and I believe you will. I'm skating on thin ice here because Jeff doesn't want me to get into the debate, but
yes.
This staff report does contain a section that specifically addresses height and the form of development, and I believe the answers that you seek will be in the report, which is published on the council's website, and the public does have access to it.
Thank you. I was just asking if it complied with those policies. Has there been a question if it complied with policy at all? So it's nice to see 11 listed, and for that reason, I'm comfortable supporting it to referral, noting that I am not fettered in any way by doing so on making a decision after hearing from the public and receiving correspondence the way we are supposed to for public hearing. So for that reason, I'll be supporting it Sorry, Mr. Mayor, maybe the same speech as the last one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hardwick. You have up to 5 minutes.
Yes, I'm so pleased to hear that Councillor DeGenova is drawing upon the former council's legacy of
Now, Councillor
interlocking
Hardwick,
plans.
let's keep it on.
Excuse me. The point here is that that this is not, and I have gone through in detail, and this is not compliant. And it does beg the question, why have plans if we're not going to adhere to them? So quite ironic to hear those plans being cited as giving justification. But this is one of the concerning things about using these plans as precedent, especially when they're based on erroneous underlying assumptions. So it seems that minds are made up, but there is no question that this and other projects are moving forward that are not compliant, and it doesn't seem to matter.
Okay, thanks so much. Councillor DeGenova, I have you on the queue.
I just have to say, Mr. Mayor, my mind is not made up, and I want to make that very clear because that I understand could put us in legal jeopardy. And I just stated that in my closing argument. I do come to this with an open mind, but I also understand to even get to hear the public, to have open and transparent legal consultation instead of a bunch of memos that the public doesn't receive and only I receive. I need to move this forward. So I wanted to state for the record that I am keeping an open mind. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fry, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I'm hoping this is still an opportunity for us to ask questions of staff.
Yep, you can ask points of information here.
Yeah, fantastic. So through you then, I'm just, I'm reflecting on some of Councillor Hardwick's concerns about the dovetailing with the community plan. And as I read it, I do recognize that particular area is isolated from the Grandview section, and that it is already a significant amount of social housing. And I note that in that sub area, it talks about heights up to 6 stories for secured market rental. And I note that this particular project is a social housing project, obviously addresses some critical needs for urban indigenous populations that are elsewhere referenced in the plan. And so when in the report summary, where staff have assessed the application and concluded generally meets the intent of the community plan with respect to the delivery of social housing, I'm wondering if you could just articulate a little bit further what that means in the context of when we're comparing it to up to 6 stories for secured market rental versus indigenous focused social housing.
I am going to, of course, turn this over to staff, but I think again we're in a kind of a dangerous legal ground here, and I'm sure the lawyers are kind of pulling their hair out because this kind of debate should be again at the public hearing. But I will turn it over to staff in case they can carefully add anything to help Councillor Fry with this.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. I would agree. I think we are kind of at the boundaries here. Maybe if Mr. Greenberg has any additional advice that he's able to provide at this point.
Yes, it's Jeff Greenberg again. Councillor Fry, I really think that the question that you're getting at is going to the details and merits of the application and is much more appropriately addressed at the public hearing by planning staff answering that question at that time. And then the entire public can hear the answer to the question that you have, and then everyone is on an equal ground at the public hearing to know what information is being considered or not being considered in the deliberations. At the moment, the public is not here and is not hearing this debate or discussion, and is not therefore not privy to the questions and the answers that you're getting.
Okay, I appreciate that and withdraw the question, and I'm satisfied with staff's assessment in referring this report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fry. That's it for questions or for comments, so I'm going to move us to a queue for the vote. And that is passed with Councillor Hardwick in opposition. Okay, Council. So let's see what's next. Oh, bylaws. Awesome. So we have 23 bylaws on the agenda with about an hour and 15 minutes left. Council members who were not present for the meeting related to public hearing enactment bylaws must confirm they have reviewed the proceedings of the meetings if they wish to vote on the enactment. And I'm going to go through a list now of folks that were absent for whatever reason. Bylaw 6 is from the public hearing of November 5th. Councillor Carr and Hardwick were absent for the public hearing. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed the proceedings you missed, and will you be voting on the enactment?
I have not, will not.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Hardwick.
Have not, will not.
Okay, thank you. Bylaw 9 is from the public hearing of November 5th. Councillors Carr and Hardwick are absent from the public hearing. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed the proceedings, and will you be voting?
Have not, will not.
Councillor Hardwick.
Have not, will not.
Okay, bylaw 10 is from the public hearing of April 4th. Councillor Hardwick was absent. Councillor Hardwick, have you reviewed the proceedings and will you be voting?
Have not, will not.
Thanks. Bylaw 11 is from the public hearing of November 5th. Councillors Carr and Hardwick were absent from the public hearing. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed the proceedings? Will you be voting?
No, I have not, will not.
Councillor Hardwick.
Have not, will not.
Bylaw 12 is from the public hearing of January 23rd. Councillors Carr, Dejanova, and myself were absent. Councillor Carr, have you reviewed and will you be voting?
Have not, will not.
Councillor Dejanova?
I have and I will, Mr. Mayor.
I have and I will as well. Bylaw 19 is from the public hearing of January 15th and 17th. Councillor Dominato, have you reviewed the proceedings? Will you be voting?
I have not and will not.
Thanks. Any member wish to hold any of the bylaws for debate, separate vote, or for conflict of interest?
Yes, once in here, I'd like to hold 6 and 12.
Okay, hold 6 and 12. Sorry, I'm just taking a note here. Thanks so much. So let's see now. Clerks, what we're going to do, we're going to, these are for debate, Councillor Swanson, or for questions to staff, or?
I just want to make my vote consistent. I won't yak about them.
Okay, great. So thanks for that. So clerks, if you just help me through this one. Councillor Swanson wants to have a separate vote on bylaws 6 and 12. Should we do those first?
Yes, Mayor, that would be fine.
Okay, great. So I don't see anybody else on the queue. I've made it all the way through. So we're going to have a, we're going to have a recorded vote on bylaw 6. So I'll get clerks to do the queue.
Point of privilege?
Yes, you may have been absent or not voting. So
that's right. So will you record me that way?
Yes, that's right. So just to remind folks, bylaw 6 is Councillor Carr and Hardwick are, I guess they would be absent. What's that? I don't quite know any, I don't know how you're going to mark that, clerks, but. Clerks are just marking that now. Right. Okay. So that bylaw passes with Councillor Swanson in opposition. And we're going to go do the same thing with bylaw 12. I'm just looking through the list here. Bylaw 12, Councillor Carr will have to mark you as absent, or Councillor Dejanova and myself have reviewed the information. So I'll call the vote now.
So, Mary Stewart, we don't have somebody moving and seconding the bylaws yet. So
I'm sorry.
We'll have to do the vote again.
Okay, sorry about
that. I'd be happy to move that or second it.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Dejanova, Councillor Fry, we'll have to vote again. Not the same mark. Okay, if everybody could just vote again. Thanks. Councillor Swanson in opposition. And we just pull the vote up on screen. I'm just going to pause for a sec for clerks to kind of get sorted, and then we'll move to the next bylaw 12.
Mover and a seconder, please.
Yes, can I have a mover?
So
Thank you. Thank you. Same as last time. Thanks for that. And now we can vote. Councillor Carr was absent for that one. There we go. Okay, so that has passed with Councillors Swanson and Hardwick in opposition. Now we're going to do a blanket vote on all the remaining. So would someone like to move the adoption of bylaws? Okay, I heard Councillor Dejanova, with the exception of bylaws 6 and 12.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, will my vote, I'm sorry, point of privilege.
Yes.
I've never been absent before, so I don't know how to do this. Sorry.
Yeah, what'll happen is the clerk, because why we do the script beforehand is a point of procedure. Why we do the script beforehand is for you to indicate which ones you will not be voting on, and in the blanket vote, the clerks will record it as you being absent.
For those specific ones.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what we did. Yeah. No problem at all. So I had a Councillor Dejanova moved it. Do we have a seconder?
Second, Councillor Bly.
Okay. All in favor say yay.
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 Opposed say nay. Great. So that motion passes unanimously. And the list of approved bylaws can be found on the city's website. Okay, we're cruising at coming close to 9. There's one administrative motion on the agenda. Approval of form of development 5027 Boundary Road. Anybody wish to declare a conflict of interest on this one? Someone like to move the motion?
Kirby Young.
Thank you. Seconder?
Councillor Bly.
Second, Councillor.
I heard Councillor Bly. Okay. Any discussion? I see Councillor Kirby Young. I'm going to move us over to the main queue.
No, that's actually for the next item. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Right. So no discussion. So all those in favor say yay.
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 Opposed say nay. Great. Okay, that's passed. Thank you. So now we're on to council members' motions. We have 3 members' motions on the agendas today. Council members have 2 minutes to introduce their motion and 1 minute each to ask clarifying questions of the mover. Motion 1 is an easy one. Request for leaves of absence. Councillor Weave for civic business for the meetings on January 20th, February 10th, March 10th, and June 16th, all from 9:30 to 1:30 p.m.
So moved, Councillor Dejanova.
Not quite done yet. Councillor Dejanova for civic business. Meetings on July 7th and October 6th and November 3rd, all from 12:30 to 5:30. So Councillor Dejanova moving it. Seconder?
Second, Councillor Carr.
Thanks very much. All those in favor say yay.
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 Opposed say nay. Okay, great. That passes. Okay, motion 2 is turning the key, encouraging affordable home ownership in the city of Vancouver, moved by Councillor Dejanova. And Councillor Dejanova, you have up to 2 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was just thinking back to 7 years ago or 6 years ago when I first put the motion forward for affordable home ownership. And here we are today, and appreciate that there's a number of different initiatives for affordable home ownership in our city. Bear with me, Council. I'm going to try and start my video here and hope that I will not lose connection with you. I just in introducing the motion, I wanted to note that after speaking with staff and speaking with the city manager, that I will be intending to, I know that there is a speaker to this, so intending to refer this forward, but also to modify the timeline to Q4, and that staff would come back, maybe not with recommendations, but at least a report back and update. The point of this is very clear, and it's about utilizing BC Housing's Housing Hub program, which I understand that, an MOU with them would help the city of Vancouver, instead of allowing applicants specifically to choose the locations of where these homes would go. It would also give our staff greater oversight. Also looking at CMHC's programs to make sure we leave nothing on the table. And I think that there's a way for some synergies here between this motion, the motion that you've moved forward, Mr. Mayor, as well as the motion that Councillor Dominato had moved forward quite recently also about different types of affordable home ownership. This specifically looks at some partnerships that would move it forward. With BC Housing, we have 2 units in the city of Vancouver of affordable home ownership right now. That's two townhomes. Coquitlam has many more. They have an MOU, and I also just wanted to state that affordable home ownership, in fact, does help people of lower incomes in the rental market, as people who could not afford a down payment are able to apply to BC Housing for the second mortgage. And the thought is, and we have some research at the City of Vancouver to show that this in fact would create some vacancy in the rental market. I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I can't see my timer right now, so
You're
I'll
at
leave
2.
it there.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thanks very much. Any questions for Councillor Dejanova? I don't see any questions, so.
Can I move this to the next committee meeting, if that's possible? Oh, I see someone else on the queue.
No, that's right. Yep. So would somebody like to, we need somebody to second the motion first.
Sorry, Kenny, I just have a question.
Oh, you do? Okay. Up to 1 minute then.
Sorry.
Yeah, my question is to the mover, recognizing how important this topic's been and that it's taken 7 years. Why do you think it's taken so long to really get momentum in Vancouver, recognizing that affordable home ownership is something that I've heard a lot of people talk about?
Well, I have 50 seconds left, but when I first started this in the Minister of Housing's office several years ago, BC Housing was very interested. They took my briefing notes and we worked together collaboratively, and they had already been working on this. They have some excellent information, and they also, the issue with Vancouver specifically is we needed a charter change, whereas the community charter would have allowed this. BC Housing's made this so much easier because we don't have to choose the individuals. BC Housing will vet them and offer them a second mortgage, which essentially is their down payment. So I'm hoping that we could utilize through MOU the ability for our staff to be able to kind of choose what projects that went to. Happy to talk to you more, Councillor Weeb, at the next meeting. I don't have very much time, but interim rezoning policy was passed in Vancouver to allow it. It never did come to fruition. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Well, that's the minute. So I don't see any of the councillors with questions. So we need a seconder. We have a seconder.
Second, Councillor Kirby.
I think I heard Councillor Dominato there first to the second. So we have received requests to speak to this motion. If council would like to hear the speakers, we can refer the motion to the standing committee on Wednesday, February 10th, starting at 9:30. Somebody like to move it?
So moved. Councillor Dejanova.
The seconder.
Councillor Bly.
Councillor Bly. All those in favor say yay.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Opposed say nay. Great. So that motion's referred to the standing committee meeting on March 10th. Motion 3 is a community safety and well-being framework. And I'd like to note that due to a staff error, the title of motion was incorrect when first posted. This motion is going to be now moved by Councillor Weeb. Councillor Weeb, you have up to 2 minutes. I can put you on the queue here.
Yeah, obviously there was a little bit of confusion, and I will be pulling the motion tonight, and I will be resubmitting a new notice of motion to recognize a couple of the components that need to be dealt with within the motion. I think that I'm sorry to people that have been involved and councillors that I gave a certain statement, and then instead this actually in one way actually made the polarization between the two sides, including community services, worse. And I think that that's a discussion, and I think this is a very important topic that's affecting so many people in Vancouver. I think it needs to be dealt with appropriately.
Okay.
I'm going to take the next 2 weeks, so I will be pulling the motion tonight.
Okay, we don't need any further action. You're just you're entitled to withdraw this, Councillor Weeb, so we don't need a vote on this. Great. So thanks for that. And now we're moving on to the next item, which is the notice of motion for council members. Go ahead, Councillor Weeb, I have you on the queue. That you want to?
Yes, I'm going to submit a motion called Community Safety and Wellbeing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Swanson.
I have one called Protecting Tenants from Real Estate Investment Trusts and Other Types of Investors.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bly.
I have one motion aligning the cannabis license fee structure to support Vancouver businesses.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yes, I have one entitled Daylighting Building Permit Wait Times.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, I have two. UBCM resolution updating BC's wrongful death law. And number two is local elections review and reform.
Thank you. If Councillor Kirby Young could take the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I have one motion called Understanding COVID-19 Economic Recovery Through Housing Construction. If I can take the chair back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I have one that I had called notice on last time that I'd held back, and it's childcare that works, extended hour and around the clock childcare for working families in Vancouver.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Dominato.
Mayor, I'm on the queue for new business.
Okay, thanks very much. So I'm going to close. The members' motion portion. Just a reminder that we need these submitted to the titles submitted to the clerk. Okay, so we're on new business.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of privilege. The
Yes.
council meeting amendments group was what I understood we were supposed to send these to. Is that not the case?
As long as it makes it to the clerk in one form or another, we're good. So whichever one you want to send it in. Okay, thanks. New business inquiries and other matters. I have Councillor Dominato. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. And so I've circulated an urgent motion to Mayor and Council to consider this evening, and it's specifically with respect to the PNE and its efforts to get COVID funding relief. So you hopefully have that in your inbox, but it is, I know that, well,
Second, Councillor Dejanova.
Thank you. Can I speak to it right now, Mayor?
Yes, we need, right, so you're putting a, first of all, have you sent it into the clerks?
Yeah, sorry, Council, not the clerk, so I will do that right now.
Okay, thanks. And so under this new business, you are putting forward a motion and it's been seconded, so now we're on the main queue. Yes, and so since you've moved it, you can speak to it, Councillor Dominato. Please go ahead. Up to 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I don't need to elaborate on the role the PNE plays in our city in terms of being a critical employer, but also an enormous contribution to arts and culture within our city. But it has been incredibly hit by the pandemic. We've been in active discussions, both at the political level as well as the public service level with the federal government to get financial relief through the federal subsidy program. Unfortunately, I have not been able to gain success or traction there. We've also been in discussions with the province, but there was, of course, the provincial election. And so we subsequently, and I believe the mayor did, that I know through the PNE, the CEO been in touch with ministers provincially around seeking funding relief as well. The urgency now is that, we haven't been able to find any funding through the province. We haven't been able to obtain funding to the province, and they are bringing forward a budget in the next 3 to 4 weeks, as well as a throne speech. And so on behalf of the PNE, would like council support in empowering you, Mayor, to further advocate on the PNE's behalf and in whatever efforts that in terms of writing the Prime Minister, in terms of writing the Premier, and any other informal discussions you may be able to undertake to get some relief, because the pandemic, we're certainly not out of the woods now. And so I think we need to consider the viability of the organization, and any support would be welcome. And they have, to be clear, shut out from any subsidy support, unlike other fairs and organizations across the country who have received support.
Okay, thanks very much. Councillor Dejanova, I have you on the list.
Okay.
We've already seconded. It is seconded.
Yeah.
You seconded.
I think I did. Yeah, thank you.
Did you want to say anything on this?
I just wanted to ask a point of information through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dominato.
Okay.
And that is, I understand that she had stated that she had hoped that there would be requests to the federal government for funding, the provincial government for funding. But sometimes I find that there's also a loophole that the federal government has given the provincial government a certain amount of money to disperse. You know what I'm talking about, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
dispersed to different municipalities that isn't considered federal funding or provincial funding. And perhaps, Mr. Mayor, you would know exactly what that fund is called. It often changes, and I happen to know this just through my work in non-market housing. And my past experience working for nonprofits. I just wondered, Councillor Dominato, was it your intention also that we seek all avenues of funding, including that type of funding, to make sure that although the PNE, the Pacific National Exhibition, does not tick all of the boxes that apply to the specific programs of funding that have come forward for COVID-19, that there's some flexibility here, and if at all that funding could be secured through funding that the federal government has given to the province, that be something that the City of Vancouver does indeed try to secure.
Yes, certainly that would be, to your question, Councilor Genova, to pursue all avenues possible. I think the PNE has demonstrated they've been very creative and resilient throughout. They've been able to undertake a number of drive-through events, including the Winter Lights, which was probably one of the few kind of winter Christmas events that were able to go on this year. And but despite that, there are still significant shortfalls, and they've had to lay off probably the vast majority of their workforce, with the exception of a very small number of people. And so yes, I would like us to exhaust all avenues, and as well as if there's any opportunity to get matching funds from the province if we have to put something in, but open to all suggestions and around that.
Thanks so much, Councillor Dominato. I wholeheartedly support this, and I just wanted to state that, and I thank you for bringing this forward. I think that it is urgent. It shouldn't wait another 2 weeks, and if the mayor is willing to pen another letter, I wholeheartedly support this. I think that the workforce in Vancouver is something that we have seen significantly impacted in a way that we have never seen before. The pandemic has had impacts that have rippled across just our city. I've heard stories of people who were on work visas who actually had employment with specific places. This isn't specifically about the PNE, but I think it is important to note. And their visas say that they can only work in a certain place. They've been devastated by the facts that their companies have shut down, that they no longer have work, that they've been laid off. That being said, with borders closed and certain, we can focus on economic recovery, but I think at the same time, there are some people that are just trying to get by. And that being said, I think that we have to do what we can to protect our assets. And I do see both the PNE and Hastings Park as assets in our city. Thank you.
Thanks. I have myself on the list. I was just wondering if Councillor Kirby-Young, you could take over chair while I...
Yes, please go ahead.
Thanks very much. Just joining in the debate. Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Dominato, for bringing this forward. I know you're closer to this, the PNE, than most of us because of your work there. I'm just wondering if you could just give us a sense of how bad is the financial situation there, to your knowledge. That's a point of information through the chair, if that's possible.
Yeah, we're at like tens of millions of dollars we're talking about, and I think that as I reflected earlier, is that they've been operating incredibly lean, and they've done furloughs, they've laid off management, they've obviously had seasonal workers as well, but we're down to a bare minimum. And while there's been some revenue made up through some of these smaller events I've mentioned, it doesn't meet our needs. And the opportunity through the federal subsidy program was, I think up to this date, it would have been to the tune of $3 million that the PNE could have received, like other fairs and events, and by June of this year would be up to $6 million.
And if I can follow up with that, to my understanding, the PNE is the only fair in Canada that's being denied these access to this federal program. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's correct. That's my understanding. Is that when you look at the CNE, the Stampede, the Rail Rodeo, that they've all been able to access a federal wage subsidy, and the PNE, just because of its being part of the municipal ownership structure, is not able to access the subsidy.
And this might be a tough thing to do, but I'm just wondering, how dire is the situation there? I mean, I think, I just, my wife, Jeanette, all her first jobs were at the PNE. It's such a source of employment, and I know we can't do that right now with physical distancing, but if it goes away, then future generations won't be able to enjoy this, as well as a great gathering place for folks. Everybody, I loved PNE. So, can you give us an assessment of the kind of future prospects for the PNE if there isn't some help coming soon?
Yeah, certainly. Sorry, I'm getting a bit of an echo, but I think, as I mentioned, there's been significant loss. They canceled $52 million in events, so that's event revenue. And when I mentioned the layoffs, 93% of the PNE's full-time union team has been laid off, and 50% of its management team have been laid off. And this is an iconic organization that I think people just think about the fair, but they deliver year-round activities and events in terms of managing Hastings Park. So there's lots of community events like skating and other events throughout the year, but also a key part of our tourism sector and our arts and culture sector in terms of concerts. So there's a significant risk to the organization from my perspective, and that's where I think the financial relief comes in through our other higher levels of government.
Okay, thanks so much. I will, if this passes by council, I'll do everything I can and would call on council to help us. I think we probably need to. I have been working through federal MPs, as I know others have, to secure this funding, but I think we probably need to take it up a notch to be much more vocal. And if this passes, I'll do my absolute best to make it painful not to help us here. So thank you again, Councillor Dominato, and that's it for me. Can I have the chair?
Any questions or comments, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, it is.
Great. Well, back to you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carr, up to you. 5 minutes.
Oh, sorry, is this on a new matter, or did you? I'm not confident.
No, this is the PNE.
Oh, still the PNE. Yeah, just I did want to express real gratitude to Councillor Dominato for bringing this forward. I think I've attended the PNE from the time I lived in East Van as a little toddler, and took my kids through every year. It's iconic within the city. So thank you for bringing it forward. I fully support this.
Okay, thanks. I don't see anybody else. Oh, I have Councillor Weeb on the queue. Councillor Weeb.
Yeah, quick question to the mover. The PNE had a lot of capital projects on the planning horizon. I'm just wondering how COVID has put those into hold, recognizing there's a lot of greening and a lot of community amenities that were coming forth. I'm just wondering how this is going to relate to that work, or do you think this can help them rebuild and start moving towards that new greener fair? Okay,
sorry, Councillor Dominato, you're on mute. and I have a cracker in my mouth.
Sorry. Just to your point around just the capital investments, I don't think those are completely derailed right now. Certainly, there's a limited number of staff, so things are a bit of a holding pattern, but there is still a focus on the master plan. And also, I think we are in a position to move forward with the amphitheater renewal. And I know that's something that council has endorsed. And there was, I think, as you know, a sort of RFP process around that. So that's something that I think is actually a shining light on the horizon, is that we'll have an amphitheater that we'll be able to use more broadly going forward, that year round, because right now it's not the best year round site. There's no cover and so on. But I know there's other areas of interest like the daylight and stream and so on. And so I think we'll be in a better position to reflect on those later in the year. But certainly none of it's off the table. It's just that I think, like many organizations, they're just trying to keep going and stay viable at this point.
Thank you.
Mayor Stewart, I think you're muted.
I think that's double digits now. So I don't see anybody else on the queue. So we could take a vote on this. Councillor Weep, just need a. There we go. So that is passed unanimously. Thank you very much, Council. I am going back to Councillor Swanson next.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes here to give a shout out to.
Point of privilege, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Kirby-Young.
I was on the queue after Councillor Dominato for new business.
Oh, you know what? I've gone to the wrong queue. Sorry about that. Right, so Councillor Dominato, you're finished.
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry about that, Councillor Kirby-Young. You were next. Please go ahead, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Swanson, next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have two items of new business that I wanted to raise, and one was the first was to extend thank you and acknowledgement to Councillor Boyle for extending the opportunity for council to collectively participate in an op-ed, which ran this past weekend. Feels like a long time ago now, but in the province, and it was, I thought, a very appropriate strategy to show council's advocacy for retaining the $300 increase in the disability social assistance rates, but it also represented, I think, council using the power of its collective voice on a key issue facing our city, and we really see the downstream impacts when people do not have adequate housing and are homeless. I just thought that that was worth noting, and I just really want to extend my acknowledgement to Councillor Boyle for extending that opportunity for all of council. So that was the first item. So thank you very much for that. The second item of new business that I wanted to raise is that a week from today, next Wednesday, is actually International Holocaust Remembrance Day. As I'm sure many know, that in 2005, the United Nations General Assembly designated January 27th, which was the anniversary of the liberation of the largest Nazi concentration and death camp at Auschwitz-Birkenau, where over 6 million innocent lives were lost. And this is a day, obviously, that has had incredible bearing in our history. This day is now International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is upcoming. As I said, next Wednesday, January 27th, is observed by many UN countries, including Canada, Italy, Germany, and cities here in Canada, including Calgary, Ottawa, and Montreal. I'm very glad that Vancouver is joining them and has now added International Holocaust Remembrance Day to our official list of city observances. And I know the city has issued a proclamation to them. And also wanted to let council know that City Hall will be lighting up yellow in support, as will BC Place next Wednesday. And I think more than ever, we see an increasing rise in hate crime, and that against a number of our different communities, but we see that continually in terms of anti-Semitism, and I've seen very recent instances of that with bombing of Zoom worships and a number of signage and hateful messaging that has been graffitied in the city. And so I think as we reflect on the dark period in history, remember that the atrocities were perpetrated during the Holocaust. I'm very grateful that council has fully supported the opportunity for us to join with our Jewish community and demonstrate our support. And so I wanted to note that day is coming up for council and make sure that we all have the opportunity to recognize it. And I'm very glad that Vancouver is joining the other cities and that we're taking these steps, and we'll see those buildings lit up in Vancouver in support.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to the Militant Mothers of Raymer. January is the 50th anniversary of their action blockading the railroad tracks that their kids had to cross every day to get to school. And so I thought I'd read a few paragraphs from Carolyn Jerome's article in the Georgia Straight about their battle. She was one of the militant mothers. We were two single moms in 1970-71, living in the project's high rise at 400 Campbell, and we would each see each other in the elevator. We would talk about the control that BC Housing Commission exerted on its tenants, especially its policy of no guests allowed after certain hours, complete with eyes peering from the Housing Commission office located by the elevator. That got us laughing. Those elevator conversations inevitably turned to challenging the audacity of the nearby railroad tracks. They were running their trains to and from the docks at the same time that our kids had to cross their tracks to get to school. We started phoning the railway and phoning Vancouver City Hall, but our calls went unanswered. When we complained to the housing authority at Raymer, they just shrugged their shoulders and said, "Not our jurisdiction, blah, blah, blah." Our casual neighborly chats evolved into a group of us meeting over tea in one another's apartments, featuring tea sessions. We emerged as mothers determined to have this dangerous situation addressed. It was a cold morning on January 8th, 1971, when we first stood on the Burrard Inlet railway tracks in front of an oncoming train. Feeling the thunder of that train's reverberations beneath our feet was terrifying. Would it stop in time or drive right into us? Was this the right move to stand in front of a moving train? We hung on to each other, quivering, not so much from the cold, but from the uncertainty. We all breathed a sigh of relief as it finally braked to halt in front of us. So to make a long story short, they persevered, gaining lots of community support, and they got their overpass. Community mobilizing works, and I hope our city can remember this story. And thanks so much to Carolyn for writing it. There's a great picture of them in the straight. Lisa Aptha, who was a teenager at the time of the protest, and the militant mothers, Barbara Burnett, Joan Morelli, Carolyn Jerome, and Mug Sigurgierson. That's it.
Thanks, Councillor Swanson. Councillor Carr.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I didn't know if it was in the form of a motion that I should forward this to you, but I feel very strongly about it. It could have been informally, I guess, under other matters. But I think, like many of us, we've been following what has been happening in the United States for the last 4 years, and the recent election and the subsequent actions within the United States, and finally today's inauguration of Joe Biden as the 46th president of the United States. And I thought that it would be good of our city, you on behalf of our city, to write a letter to the U.S. President Biden, congratulating him on becoming the 46th president of the United States and expressing hope and gratitude for his inaugural remarks, which I think many of us did listen to, calling for a new era of civility, compassion, and bold action on the climate, social justice, and health emergencies we're all facing. I don't remember this happening before in my time on council, but I just think that we're at such a pivotal point in the history, really, of our world. And I think it would be just such a, I think, supportive and compassionate move on our part to send a letter of support. If you listen to his speech this morning, it really was very moving and has turned around my feeling of quite desperation in the situation in the United States to one of hope, because they are not just a country unto themselves, but really a force within the world. So it's a simple motion. I sent in a title just now at the request of the city clerk, just being a letter congratulating U.S. President Biden, and the general gist of the content is contained as I read out in my motion.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for this?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, I'll put us on a main queue. If anybody would like to speak to this, please go ahead. I don't have any. Oh, Councillor Harvick, please go ahead.
Woohoo!
That's pretty good. I think that sums it up for all of us. Anybody else? Okay, so we can call a vote on this one. Councillor Dejanova, do you need a vote assist? I don't see Councillor Dejanova on the. I know Councillor Bly had to leave. I think I'm going to mark Councillor Dejanova absent and just move on here. Thanks very much. Anything else, Councillor Carr?
That's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you. Mine is an inquiry.
Okay.
I was just looking back, and it was January 29th, 2019, so 2 years ago, that I asked in council a question on a housing file about the nature of the Housing Vancouver targets of a goal of 72,000 new homes over the decade. I asked that again on February 26, 2019. And in May, I brought forward a motion called Recalibrating the Housing Vancouver Strategy Post-COVID-19. I brought forward the motion. I actually introduced the motion, much as we just did here now on May 12th, 2020. Subsequent to that, I had a Zoom call the next day on May 21st with Gil Kelly, the Director of Planning, and Dan Garrison in Housing Policy and Regulation, together with several of my academic urban geography colleagues, Dr. David Lay, Dr. John Rose, and Andy Yan. Over that 90-minute call, we talked at length about the missing data that we really needed to be able to understand the rationale behind the Housing Vancouver targets and to get a better understanding of where we need to be going with housing. And we had a very fruitful call. We had an agenda advance. I had, and I took copious notes. I subsequently revised the motion, putting in bullet points the data sets that myself and my academic colleagues had requested. Subsequent to that, I ran my amended motion by the Director of Planning, who concurred and told me that I had captured the detail of our meeting together. I brought that motion to council, and we had an active debate about it, and it did pass unanimously with the direction to staff to provide a memo by the end of July with data attached. It had been suggested that a report would take too much time and involve a bunch of analysis, but by providing only a memo with the data attached, which was of interest to, again, my academic colleagues, that would suffice and could be quite easily presented. This is not the first time that I've brought this forward, because at the end of July, we got what was really a report with findings and not what had been understood, which was that we were to receive data. And by data, I mean in machine readable forms, Excel, shape files for GIS files. This was the nature of the conversation. So we went back and responded to the memo and went point by point through analyzing where the data had not been provided and suggesting that to create the graphs and charts, there had to be data behind it to please provide. I came forward under inquiries in September 15th and asked this, and at the time, Mr. Mayor, you agreed to help move this forward. You and I had a conversation subsequently at the end of October. So my point is, here I am 2 years later in January, after asking for an explanation and having a unanimously approved motion that directed staff to provide a memo with data. So my inquiry is, when are we going to see the data? Because if staff is not providing what it was directed to do, then we have a problem, and I hate to continue bringing this up. But until that's provided, the terms of the motion, which was approved by council, have not been met.
Okay, thank you. I know that Mr. Mokry's here now. Did you want to respond to this, Mr. Mokry, at this time? Or?
Yeah, yep. Certainly. Okay. And Councillor Hardwick and I have spoken about this. So yeah, I first acknowledge the request that's been made and the direction that's been issued by council. So I don't think there's any lack of clarity around that. At this point in time, I'm not entirely clear on what data we have, but it's clear to me that whatever data we have, we should be providing. So that's the conversation that I've had with the Director of Planning, and we'll continue to follow up. I'm not able to provide kind of a timeline for you this evening on that, but understand that this has been outstanding for a long time, and I'm certainly keen to close this off and to provide. And I appreciate, again, just to be clear, that it's source data that you're looking for, Councillor, and that was the subject of the motion. That's my objective and commitment at this point in time, is to provide you the data that we have on hand. If there's gaps in that, then to have a further conversation with Council about where those gaps are and why they exist and so on. So again, I can't speak to why this has taken so long, but I certainly acknowledge that. I don't think there's any question. And my objective and commitment is to get you that information as quickly as I can.
Thank you, Mr. Mokri. I am persevering on this because this was discussed in great specificity, and it was agreed upon and represented that it was available. And I can only ask the question, why has it not been provided when we've gone to this extent? And it was specifically determined that it was available and would be easy to provide. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks for 5 minutes. Thank you. Councillor Dejanova. Oh, who's not here? Councillor Dominato.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of inquiries and a comment to Councillor Carr. Thank you for your motion around President Biden. I realized after we voted on it that it might have been nice to also recognize our first woman Vice President Kamala Harris and first woman of color. But maybe that could be added to the letter subsequently.
Absolutely, that's been noted. No, I can definitely include that.
Yeah, I realized that after we voted. I have one inquiry to our city manager. It's just a follow-up. If we could get an update around the motion that was referred by council to staff around budget reform in election years. So this is last year. And it was referred simply to staff as a reference point, and it was to see whether we could make some changes so that council isn't forced into voting on a budget a month and a half after being elected in a civic election year. If I could just get an update as to whether that's being looked at any further and considered, just given that we'll be going into a civic election in 2022, and the intent behind that motion, while it wasn't passed, it was referred, was to see reforms in that area.
Certainly, thanks, Councillor. I know that staff have been looking at it, and I will follow up with an update on the status.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then appreciate that Councillor Kirby-Young's comments around thanking Councillor Boyle for the opportunity to participate in the op-ed. I also want to acknowledge that around the social assistance and disability rates, and then also looking at the calendar as well, so we won't be meeting next week, is that January 28th is the annual Bell Let's Talk Day, which is focused on mental health and mental health awareness in the country. And it's an area that's near and dear to my heart, and that we've recognized as a council in the past. But I think just acknowledging that particularly in this year with the pandemic, it's been very difficult on people in terms of mental health and wellness, and a number of us have talked about that as colleagues, and that's why I was excited about the conversation that Councillor Weep is trying to engage in terms of community wellness and safety as well, because the pandemic has taken a toll, and I think it's a good reminder of the importance of talking and sharing and actually asking people how they're doing, and Dr. Henry's words about moving forward and practicing kindness, because it has been a tough year, and I think people have really felt it at a level around their mental health and wellness, and so just acknowledging that day coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson? You're on mute.
I just realized that I forgot to do a notice of motion. So I've got another notice of motion for February 9th.
Yeah, it's too late though. Sorry. I'm going to move on to Councillor Fry while I think about that one. Councillor Fry?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks to Councillor Swanson for acknowledging the militant mothers of Raymer earlier, which also was precipitated in the creation of Raycam Community Center. After the success at blockading the railway and getting the pedestrian overpass, they parlayed that into a community co-op. I have two, which later became Raycam Community Center. I have two inquiries. Number one, inquiring on the status of the tiny homes motion that council approved last year. There's been increased interest in the tiny homes, and in particular, the municipality of Duncan on Vancouver Island has been pursuing that. And I know there's a number of private stakeholders who are really interested in participating, and there's some media sniffing around as well. So I'm hoping we can get an update around where staff are at on our building bylaw and zoning regulations that might facilitate the implementation of tiny homes, not just in a variety of circumstances, including on private lands. Obviously, I don't expect anything right this moment, but I would hope that we could get an update on that. And the other inquiry is acknowledging Councillor Dominato's earlier comments about mental health. A number of residents in Strathcona, adjacent to the rail crossing at Cordova and Raymer, are finding themselves increasingly desperate for some sort of intervention with the incessant dinging of the crossing when the trains are stopping there waiting to enter the rail yard. And this can be for considerable amounts of time, well over half an hour at a time. And I know that there's some work from staff, and they're planning to do some consultation with residents to talk about different options to address that. And I just want to acknowledge the desperation of folks who live in there. And there's a significant population living there in condos and social housing immediately adjacent to those tracks. So I hope we can get an update on that soon as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm just checking here on the queue. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Yeah, I do have one quick inquiry, and it's a follow-up to one I raised in December, which was about the status of the work that staff are undertaking with respect to aligning Vancouver's liquor capacity with the provincial fire code, and the motion at council. And staff did come back with an updated memo, which I appreciated in December, and advised that some sort of early assessment work was underway, and then they would be engaging with consultation various stakeholders. And I just wanted to register a formal request from the local craft breweries to be included in the list of groups that are being consulted. I know the memo suggested the Hospitality Vancouver Association and a couple of other stakeholders that would be spoken with, and the breweries were specifically asked to be consulted and suggested that one effective avenue to do that would be through the Craft Guild. And I'll pass the contact that I received on to staff, but I wanted to flag their interest formally for the record in participating in that. And again, the spirit, I think, behind that is that the industry is, just like we're all looking forward to the vaccine, I think the industry is looking forward to this as a positive opportunity once we come out the other side of COVID in terms of strengthening economic recovery. So that group would very much like to have a voice. I just want to raise that.
Thanks. I see you on the list, Councillor Swanson. I have been talking with the clerk, and we could suspend the rules if 2/3 of us agree to allow you to read your title into the record.
Okay, I move that we suspend the rules so I can read my title into the record.
I'll second that.
Thanks. I'll call yeas and nays first. All in favor, yay.
Yay.
Yay. Yay.
Opposed, nay. Okay, so Councillor Swanson, we're suspending the rules. Go ahead and you have to send the title into the clerks, but you can read it into the record.
It's a motion for February 9th called Adding a Ceremonial Name of the Komagadama Road to a Portion of Main Street.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
I don't have anybody else on the list, so I think that's it. I think we're good.
Motion to
adjourn.
Adjourn?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks. Seconder. Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Thanks.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All in favor say yay.
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 Opposed, nay. Okay, thanks,
Staff.
council. We're
Thanks, everyone.
adjourned. Thank you. We do have a public hearing tomorrow night, so we'll see you back at 6 o'clock. if I survive the police board meeting. Okay. Thanks,
Good luck,
everybody.
Mr. Mayor.
Oh,
Council.
thanks.
Good night.
Thanks.
Night.
Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.